Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Keeping You Company, a podcast where Rukamani and I talk about things that interest us. Firstly, to keep ourselves company, and hopefully to keep you all company at home. And welcome to a very special episode of this podcast. And yeah, hello to you, Aruk.
Hello, Scott Sword. Hello, everyone. Hoping that we can keep you company today as well.
Absolutely. Um, I just said it's a special episode. Do you know why?
I don't know why. Why is it a special episode?
Because not only are we talking to the folks on YouTube, this is going to be the first episode that is also going up on Spotify.
Ooh, that is exciting.
Well, I say the first episode, I mean the first episode as of the time of release, I suppose, in terms of it being released on YouTube and Spotify at exactly the same time.
Our first simultaneous release.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. And I have to
We're
find.
going multi-platform.
That's it. We're going up in the world, people. That's all thanks to my Twitch community giving suggestions, and I was told that Spotify would be potentially a better platform. Um,
Interesting.
so
Yeah, I think you had mentioned you were moving the podcasts, the old podcasts, over to Spotify, but I was not prepared for this to be the inaugural multi-platform stream. YouTube Spotify combo.
I just thrust that upon you, didn't I? There was no prior warning.
Yeah,
Well,
it happens.
I'm spending my Easter break. Recording this in the middle of April, just for um, the folks at home, so they know for timing and such. And yes, I'm slowly gonna. I've got a week break at the moment, so I'm gonna during that week break make sure that all the previous how many episodes? 18, I want to say 18 episodes uh,
Something like that.
are up on Spotify for in time for when this one drops. So yeah, if anybody's listening to this and you want to go back and listen to any more of the podcasts, you can do so either on YouTube or on Spotify, and I'll leave all the links below, and you can choose how you wish to consume this podcast. You can actually write comments on Spotify. I have now discovered this all.
Yeah, I had no idea.
I
I
had
mean,
no idea
I,
either.
I I'm never on Spotify, but I imagine what I hear about it, people talk about it like a music streaming service. So I figured you just streamed music through it. And then you were also telling me it does video, so I don't understand.
Yeah, I know. It's really crazy. Oh, sorry. I hope my mic's not blowing out for people. It seems like it is, but I don't think it's too bad. Yeah, I don't really listen to I don't really listen to podcasts on Spotify. I normally watch them on YouTube, and have them on in the background while I'm doing stuff. So yeah, also on YouTube there's loads of comments. But yeah, the podcast on Spotify, there is a comment section. I don't know how easy it is to find, but there is a comment section there. Maybe just scroll down the page and it appears. But yeah, there is also video. Um, so all the previous episodes I've uploaded, I think 8 or 9 of the episodes already as of the time of recording. And yeah, I've not had to worry about taking the footage that we'd recorded and then somehow extracting only the audio, because obviously we record it all in one go. We haven't got separate visual and audio channels or
Hmm.
anything, or streams or anything. So I was kind of worried about it being with video, but you can just upload it as a video. So
Wow.
that will do. That makes my life very easy. I don't have to worry about creating separate versions of everything. So that was nice.
Yeah, that's really handy. And it's just so funny to me. I still I got into podcasts in like 2011 or so. And so the idea of listening to a podcast mainly through YouTube, like even that is new and strange to me.
So
I have I've gone through several different iterations of how I listen to podcasts. It started out with um I had the elephant in the room was always Apple, because there was a while before Apple adopted podcasts when you just had to know that people were recording themselves and putting it up on the internet, and you could like subscribe to their RSS feeds on their individual websites.
hmm
And people started to, I think they called them podcatchers, where they would put all the things together. And then Apple came in and was like, hey, this podcast thing is getting big. Let's make our own portion of iTunes that's dedicated to podcasts. And
uh,
so that's how, like, when Apple sort of stepped into that realm is when I got into podcasts because I was doing everything through iTunes. And then over time, I think iTunes basically destroyed itself in terms of the way that I like to use it.
They didn't listen to your
Like
feedback.
it used to be the center of my media world, and now I barely ever even open the app.
Oh
It's like
no.
iTunes. What's that?
Does everybody listen
Uh,
to iTunes? I just remember using iTunes to take stuff from CDs and whatnot onto my iPod back in the day. That's what I used
right.
iTunes for.
Yeah, I mean that's where it
Haven't opened it in
started for
years.
me, and then it just became the like my entire music library, and then they started incorporating videos. They had a lot of features that you could only use through iTunes if you wanted to do certain things with video, um, and and yeah, they put podcasts through there. It sort of became a catch-all application, and at that point, I'm probably wrong about some of the specific stages of this, but because it's been a while since I lived through it, and I haven't been like researching it or anything. But I remember it being this sort of catch-all where you could sort of put everything into iTunes and have it manage your media library. And I was big into going digital at the time. I've since swung in like the completely opposite direction. So ironically, if I were like, even if they were to restore the version of iTunes that I loved, I probably wouldn't use it the way that I did in the past. So
You
maybe it's good that they changed.
that'll be just
But
them pandering for your approval. We've changed it back. Do you like it? And you're like, you're just sitting there going, yeah, that's great, but that's about 5 years too late, Apple.
yeah, I just give a sage nod of my head and then continue to ignore them. But anyway, it sort of became this like catch-all where everything that I in my media world went through iTunes,
Hmm,
and I think they didn't like how all of that functionality was combined into one application, so they started breaking it out. And
right.
so Apple sort of lost me when they broke out podcasts from iTunes because that was the one thing that I was still routinely going to iTunes for was to listen to and organize all my podcasts. And iTunes was like, or Apple was like, okay, we're gonna break that out. iTunes is going to become this relic of software for where stuff goes after you buy it on the Apple Store, and that's the context in which I still use it. I've got an iPad hooked up to my TV and speaker system so that I can, when I want to listen to music and just sit down and relax and have that experience where I'm mostly focused on the audio, but I can have the album art up on the big screen. Like I do that through iTunes still, but it's not very often that I get to sit down and listen to music like that. So I hardly ever use it anymore. But the shift that happened to me with my podcast listening was they pushed it over to its own podcast app, became Apple Podcasts, and boy, that thing was a mess.
Oh, I'd have no idea. In what way was it a mess? I've never been on Apple. Apart from having
Yeah,
iTunes as a
well,
standalone thing, I've never used any of their stuff.
it just became really hard to organize all the things, right? So the nice thing about having these apps manage your podcasts is it automatically will update, right? So it knows to go and grab the latest episode of every podcast that you're following, and it will like you can set it up so that it auto downloads to your phone, or you can stream the episodes if you don't want to download them, or you can and like in a lot of podcasts these days they'll come out with like an alternative screen, so they'll have the main image for the podcast sort of like album art, but if you click on that you can read all the notes that the people have put together for their show, so you can see all the show notes and things, and just a better a better podcast experience is possible than Apple Podcasts. Also, the app was just crashing all the time, and there were like compatibility issues, and like because the different podcasts are all hosted on different services, of course. So it's all broken up. But I eventually switched over. A friend of mine, because I told another friend of mine this, and I was like, I can't understand why Apple, which used to be the center of my podcasting world, just stopped being good at podcasting. And he was like, yeah, there's this other app called Overcast that I've been using for that functionality. And so most of the podcasts that I listen to are through Overcast. And occasionally I will listen to one on YouTube. And I've never listened to one on Spotify, but that's just because I don't have Spotify.
I'm trying to remember how I started with mine. Because the first podcast I think I was listening to on a regular basis was Hello Internet. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to remember, did I start watching that on YouTube? I think I must have started watching on YouTube because I suppose I would have seen it promoted through either CGP Grey or Brady Heron's videos. So they'd
Right.
automatically just taken me to the YouTube link. And they did have their standalone website, I think, where all the podcast episodes went up.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be on Spotify as well. They just end up going everywhere. But I
Right.
think I normally listen through the standalone site, I think, if I remember rightly. Um, and then yeah, it just seems to be now I'm always on YouTube listening to podcasts, just because normally it's a YouTuber who I like. So then
Mm-hmm.
I just find the podcast that way. There are some standalone podcasts, like for science and stuff, that I will find on other websites and maybe on Spotify. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's just because at the very beginning, you're on YouTube, I'm on YouTube, so the most intuitive
Yeah.
place to put it was on YouTube, and then the fact that I started it off on my own, so it just went onto my channel instead of creating like a
Mm-hmm.
standalone channel at the very beginning. Um, but yeah, it was only then when people were talking to me about it and saying, "Oh, is it on Spotify?" I was like, "Well, no," because there was a point over the previous summer where we did mention that did I float the possibility of moving it onto Spotify? I can't remember.
I
Um,
don't remember that at all. I mean, you may well have. I just don't remember.
it's also possible it's a fault that I had alone and I didn't voice it because I remember also then that's the point where we sort of rebranded, like I'm saying it, like it's like
Right.
renamed the podcast because it used to be called if you're one around for the very beginning, it used to be called a video to keep you company if you need it. Then we
Yep.
end up shortening it to keeping you company. It must have been at the same time when I was mowing the lawn during the summer break when I have a lot of these ideas, and then some of them must have got voiced out loud to you, and others didn't. So it's very
Hmm.
possible that the Spotify one was one which I didn't voice out loud, but I do remember researching it. Um, but then it was the fact that again, kind of like a lot of things, like the Twitch stuff as well, where people like push me to do something, like, "Oh, do it because it has disadvantages." And the advantages they were saying were, well, on YouTube it drains the battery and stuff if you were wanting
Hmm.
to listen. I guess the only other solution is if you've got like those Bluetooth headphones, you can just leave the phone charging somewhere while you walk around the house with them. I know a lot of people maybe don't have those headphones or don't like them or whatever. Um, but they were like, no, we on Spotify, because you can obviously turn off the phone, but it still
Mm-hmm.
plays in the background. Same, I guess, Apple Music or the Apple apps must do the same. So it doesn't matter
Yeah.
if there's video or
There's
not.
one. I don't know which one this is, but there's one particular. I think it's YouTube, and I refuse to get the YouTube app in part because of this. Also because I don't like to I don't like to use a bunch of apps. I don't even like to have them on my phone. But something like they make it a feature that it will continue to play. It's a paid feature. If that your videos or whatever will continue to play if you turn off the screen.
Oh,
And that really bothers me. I think it's YouTube because I always these days I always play it through like if someone sends me a YouTube video on my phone. First of all, I hardly ever watch YouTube on my phone. I think I like if I'm on YouTube on my phone, it's because someone sent me a link to something and it's too much of a pain for me to type it out into a browser on my laptop. um, but if I am watching something on my phone, I'll like click on the link and it'll come up and then the video won't play right. And then I'll be like, okay. And because I'm just using it through the web on my phone, I'm like I said, I don't use the YouTube app. Um, and even then, it's like, okay, if you turn off the screen, it stops everything, shuts down the entire video,
yeah.
kicks me out. I have to click on the thing again, click on the um, you click out, click back on, because the first time, no matter what, the audio doesn't play. It's a very annoying experience. But I'm not downloading the YouTube app. I'm not going to pay for that feature. Forget it.
Well, I've got the YouTube app on my phone, but I don't pay for it. So I didn't know that was I didn't realize that was a thing that the premium option offers. But I would never pay for it anyway.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it may that may no longer be true. Again, this is just I did this happened to me once, and I was like, and I looked and I remember seeing, oh, you can pay to get that feature removed. That's not worth that money to me. Forget it.
hmm. I mean, I kind of like if I'm trying to sleep or something, I could have a podcast on then, and then turn off the phone,
Yeah,
so the light's not
for sure.
showing. But then again, then you can just find it on Spotify or somewhere else. The podcast will exist elsewhere. Um,
Yeah.
so it's not a big deal. Um,
Yeah. It's like PlayStation does something similar where they know that people hate turning on their console to find that there's a new update. And so, as a paid feature of PlayStation Network, if you sign up for their PlayStation Plus package, whenever there's an update, they will automatically install it for you when the system is in sleep mode. So they know they can do it, but they make it a paid feature
of course they do.
to make that work. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not paying you.
I'm gonna sit through this update.
Yeah, you're gonna hold me hostage like that? Well, currently it's funny because I've currently disconnected my system from the internet entirely because I'm trying to play the original release version of Bloodborne.
Of course.
And if you have your console connected to the internet, every time I turn it on, it's gonna be like, "Oh, we've got updates to download for Bloodborne," and I'm like, I don't want those. I want to play 1.00. It's the whole point.
So you're going old school. You're just completely off the grid with it.
That's right.
Oh, we'll have
Which
to.
is ironic because I'm then recording it and putting it on the
Yeah,
internet.
on the internet.
If it weren't for YouTube, I wouldn't even be doing this probably.
That's a fun wee project. Just before we'll get into that because I think there's definitely a noteworthy thing we should mention. But I just want to say, in case anyone doesn't know, the background footage. If you're watching on YouTube, then obviously you can see it. If you're watching on Spotify, then you have the option to see this. But obviously, depending on how you've got your device set up, the video might be hidden. Or if you're not listening on that's the other good thing when you're listening to something on Spotify. If you're not on Wi-Fi, then the video automatically shuts off, but you still have the audio,
Nice.
so it doesn't eat away at your data. But
Hmm.
the beautiful little landscape or town that you can see is from a game called Tiny Glade, which is a game I've been playing on stream. Plug, I'm streaming on Twitch these days. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. And it's a little cute little game. They call it a diorama builder. It's like a little sandbox building game. There's no objective, no time limit. You're just given a little plot of land, and you can build whatever you want. So I started building a river town with sort of, I guess, like a medieval sort of theme to it, I suppose. But there's no real theme per se, just because it's my first ever build or proper build on the game. So I've just been building a little bit of everything. I've got a river running through the middle of it because I started with I wanted to have a raised section on both sides of the river where the town would be built and build a bridge going across it. So the town is called Bridgemore because that's the first thing
Aha.
that I built. But then it's now expanded to the point where the build is almost finished. I've just got to add lots of fine details. There's things called clutter in the game. So the game is really cool when you plop down a building and start putting windows and things on it, then random objects like benches and pitchforks and hay bales and whatever will just start randomly spawning depending on how exactly the window is placed and whatnot and where it's located. So this is all called clutter. So I want to try and collect all this clutter and then start populating the space because there are no NPCs or anything walking around. It's an empty. The only things which are alive in the town are some sheep, which you'll maybe see a little bit later on when the scene changes, um, and some ducks and fish, and that's it. And maybe some birds and butterflies flying around, but that's it. There are no NPC people walking around. But I want to make it feel like it's lived in. So I've done all the epic building stuff, and now I've got to sit
Hmm.
there tediously making sure that the windows are in the right places because there may be some buildings which I've forgotten to add windows on, and putting all these benches and market stands and whatever all in the right place. Um, so it's coming to an end. It's been about I don't know about 30, 40 hours worth of time on stream. But obviously, that's not fully concentrated time because obviously Twitch chat gets in the way and we have funny conversations about whatever. Um,
Yep.
we've had quite a few educational streams actually where we end up talking about the English language. Funnily enough, I've got quite a lot of American viewers, so we end
Oh,
up having
cool.
quite a lot of chats about the difference between British and American English. We had I won't say the word on the podcast, even though the podcast is not PG. This swear might be slightly too strong for certain folk, but we had a whole conversation at one point about "see you next Tuesday."
Hmm.
If that acronym means anything. um, yeah,
I was gonna say I've heard people talk about that. I haven't heard that acronym before, but I put it together now. I've heard people talk about that particular aspect of British English before, and Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah,
Very very strong in the U.S. context.
absolutely. I had a funny experience where I raided another streamer who has like really sort of chilled out co-working streams and board game streams and whatnot. And and her streams are always family friendly. So obviously I don't come in, swearing like a trooper in the chat because I'm even in
Hmm.
my stream that anything can go really as long as it's not ridiculously excessive. But you know me, you've seen me from the Fear of Dracula stuff. I'll swear
Yep.
very openly.
Hmm.
Um, but she just happened to ask me, oh, what rating is your stream? Would you call it family friendly? Would you call it PG? Would you call it 18 plus? And I said, oh, because this was a few months ago when I hadn't really sort of thought about it and I hadn't tagged my stream as something. So I said something along the
Yeah.
lines of, oh well, it's I want it to be as PG as possible, but swears will slip out. And actually, since then, I've actually added a tag onto my stream that profanity is present on the stream. So, um, but
Interesting. That's a tag?
yeah,
That's like an existing, or did you make that up yourself?
yeah. When you set up like the stream thing, like when you go into OBS and you set up the YouTube live stream, um,
Hmm.
when you link your Twitch account to OBS, it comes up with a lot more options, like the stream title, blah blah blah, what game you're playing automatically, blah blah blah, and then underneath it'll ask you, do any of these things apply to your stream? And it'll ask you questions like, do you talk about topics which are potentially um, I'm trying to think of the right word. Controversial is not the word I mean, but things which are potentially graphic.
Hmm.
So if you're talking about real life violence or sexual harassment or these sort of things, are you talking about these topics? Is a lot of profanity? Are you talking about, or is the video game that you're playing, does it involve lots of like gory violence or sex or whatever? And you can sort of tag what it is you're doing. So there's one there for the swearing. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll say that I swear, um, just so then there's nobody unexpectedly wandering in and then complaining why the f bombs and things are getting thrown out. But
Yeah.
when I joined this other stream, this was a few months ago. They just asked, "Oh, are you family friendly or not?" I said, "Well, I tried to be as possible, but swears just slip out." And I said, "Well, I am Scottish. I must have just said it." And she was like, "Oh yeah, okay. I know the Scottish and the English and the Australians have a very different sort of perception of swearing compared to the Americans." I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And then um, she said something like, "Oh, my streams are family friendly, which means you're allowed one c word every so often." And my brain just instantly went, "Really? See you next Tuesday? Isn't that a bit strong?"
Hmm.
And then I was sitting there going, "No, no, she can't mean that. That's not possible. That can't be the swear word she's talking about." And eventually, then once it became clear that she was talking about the word crap, I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh wow.
For me, I was like, "That's not a swear," but
Wow.
fair
I
enough.
wouldn't I wouldn't even put that as a swear word. Yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
Mm. I think she may have been an elementary teacher or something along those lines back in like in a
Ah.
previous life career stage of her life. So yeah, maybe that's a different sort of mentality from that. I mean, when you see her stream,
Yeah, I've
it's all set
gotten
up like a classroom.
interesting. Yeah, I've gotten well, I don't know if I've gotten it because it's sort of indirect secondhand, but I've talked to people, including my brother, who went to a school system where they were like, you can't, like, forget saying a swear. You can't even say a word that could be a substitution for a swear. Because if you say a word that could be a substitution for a swear, you've as good as said a swear. And I remember just thinking, like, that is mind-bogglingly silly to me. Like, come on. There is a difference between saying a swear and not saying a swear. The two things, like one of those words provokes a sort of reaction in a listener that the other one does not,
Mm,
right? I know that like maybe logically, right? If we're building like first of all, language doesn't work logically. So this is an entirely moot exercise, but if you do want to logically construct this like parallel meaning, it's just like, oh, this word is a substitute for this word, and therefore when you say the substitute you're essentially saying this word, and you've put that word in my head and now I'm offended. It's like maybe if you think of language logically like that, then maybe, But most people don't think of language logically like that. Most people are going to have just an instant reaction
Mhm.
to hearing a term that they disapprove of, that they are not going to have if you say something that sounds similar but is not that same term. And quite frankly, just the fact I think you can get a lot of information from a character who, if they come on to like, I'm thinking of like old timey television stuff, where if they come on the screen and they're like, oh, well, gosh darn gee wilkie, you
Gee
know,
whiz.
yeah, gee whiz, that tells you something about that character that you would not get. That information that you'd get from a character who speaks like that is not the same information that you would get if they came on and just said a bunch of swears. Like if you were to replace all those like relatively inoffensive versions with their equivalents, you would get a completely different you would form a different opinion of that character. So the fact that you're pulling back conveys information in and of itself. And I think it's just completely wrong-headed to be like, oh no, you've said a substitution. A substitution is as good as the thing it's substituting for. Therefore, you said a bad word. That way of thinking about language bothers me.
It's also the whole point that swears are only swears in the sense that they provoke that reaction from the listener in the first place, right?
Yeah.
If the world was different and everyone was saying, I don't know, I'll do it for effect. If everyone was saying fuck all the time, but there was no
Hmm.
reaction to it, then it would lose its potency as a swear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's a little bit more to it than just the listener, right? I think there's also certain things that you can get for the like speaker, because if you feel as a speaker like you are like no longer holding yourself back,
Mm.
right? There is some value in that. I'm thinking now of this study that I think has come up. You must have been via this stream that you're talking about now, because someone posted something in the chat about how like Scott Sword, in addition to a Twitch stream, also has a community server on Discord. Um,
Yay! Plug.
and maybe you can link that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
plug,
can
plug,
I can link
plug.
that.
Yeah. But I didn't catch the stream, but I caught the conversation in the community later on where someone was like, here's the study I found about why swearing is good for you. And I was like, oh, I haven't read all of these, but I know at least one of these studies, which is they had people put their hands in a bucket of ice water, which is a physically demanding thing. And they found that people who were not allowed to swear while they had their hand in the bucket of ice water would, on average, pull their hand out faster than the people who were allowed to swear. So it was doing something to their like pain tolerance in a way that allowed them, like the idea that you can blow off steam, so to speak, allowed them to tough out that harsh physical condition more effectively than people who were trying to control themselves, like both keeping their hand in the water in an unpleasant experience and trying to hold themselves back in terms of what they said.
Mhm.
And I think I've mentioned like my memory of that study, the big takeaway is you have a certain amount of willpower and you're limited in how much you can use it, right? So you're trying to the more you're trying to limit yourself, of a mm, the less long of a period of time you can keep those limits in place, because your willpower is essentially finite. But this person was also saying that the person has done now a bunch of other studies that show it's not necessarily all about willpower, and there might be something to the benefits of swearing for the speaker, which I'm
Mm.
someone who basically never swears, so I'm not getting those benefits. But I
Oh,
do think it's fascinating.
we'll have to do an experiment. We'll have to do like a make you a lab rat for a little bit and just go off on a swearing tirade and see if that makes you feel better about yourself, and see if that
Yeah,
enhances
maybe.
your, I don't know, your working performance or whatever. Put you into
Yeah.
different scenarios and see what happens. We'll have to, yeah, do control tests and then tests where you just go off on swearing tirades and then see what happens.
Yep.
I mean, it's also
It
just
is funny though, because like the more people get to know me, the more they realize I basically never swear. And there have been 2 points in my life where, like, sort of for opposite reasons, people have like been like, "Huh?" Like where they've had this moment. And so one of my friends that I made in Japan, like, we just been like, as far as I was concerned. Sorry, I can't speak. This is even worse than translation born for some reason. I don't Not translation born. The old hunt for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not even playing a video game. But the my friend, I was like, we've just been going back and forth, having normal conversation for months at this point, and all of a sudden he was like, I just realized you never swear. Like, you just don't do that. And I was like, yeah, I pretty much don't. Like, it's not impossible, but pretty much never. And he was just off put by that, which is sort of an interesting reaction. I was not expecting, because I'd never in my life had someone, because this was like I was living in Japan, I was living abroad for the first time. This was one of the very first times I was getting to know a new set of people who had no context for interacting with me before. And I was like, oh, is that a surprising thing about me? I guess it is. Because most of the other people I'd known for my entire life, they're just like, oh yeah, Matt doesn't swear. Um, so
I guess
that was the one side. Go ahead.
I guess it's probably more of the shock of the fact to meet somebody who doesn't swear, because the majority.
Hmm.
I don't know. Would we say the majority of people swear?
Oh, I think so.
But in terms of how, what level though?
Yeah, I don't think everybody like I think there are different levels to it, but I think that the majority of people do swear in their day-to-day life.
So maybe that was maybe more of the shock to meet
That's what I think
somebody
it
who
was.
is able to restrain themselves, or maybe you don't feel like you're restraining yourself. Maybe just naturally you don't have to swear.
Well, that's what I think it is I basically trained myself into that pattern. It's harder for me at this point to say swear. Like a lot of people, like they don't swear, but they're controlling themselves. Whereas for me, it's sort of like there are moments where I will catch myself wanting to reach for a swear because I have a lot of input of people swearing, but for the most part, just my regular speech patterns don't go to swears. So if I do want to swear, I have to reach for it, which I think is like an unusual thing. Because again, I feel like most people do end up swearing in some contexts. You know, not necessarily all the time, but I think it's just normal, and people expect that to be the norm. And so I think you're right. I think that's what was sort of tripping up my friend. It was like, there's someone who just doesn't swear, even casually, like even when he like bangs his toe or something like that. It's
But do you know how you were able? Because obviously that's something that's come from. That's not a recent thing. That's something that has been ingrained sort of into you your whole life.
yeah.
Do you know how that came about?
Well, it started as a decision, a conscious decision on my part, where it was swearing was just frowned on in my house, and so I was like, okay, I'm just not going to swear. And
Oh, you
yeah,
didn't. You could have rebelled and sworn more.
oh yeah, I could have rebelled. I was not a rebellious kid. Like,
Shock,
yeah,
shock horror.
yeah, yeah. I was not a rebellious kid. I wanted to, I wanted to just do the right thing all the time. I did not always succeed. In fact, I was probably more rebellious when I was like a little kid than I was because you associate rebellion with teenagers. I was probably more of a bad kid when I was in elementary school.
More maybe mischievous, perhaps.
No, no, but I was a,
Oh,
I was a terror.
like a terror ray. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was a
Rook.
bully. I was awful.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh no.
it's like throwing sand in people's eyes. It was awful.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I had this conception of myself as a proud warrior, and I would not stand for anyone impinging upon my honor.
Or your sandbox.
Can you can you tell where my sandbox? Can you tell I read a lot of fantasy as a kid?
Well, I'm glad you're
Yeah,
not I'm glad you're not throwing people throwing people into people's eyes. Very good, Scott. So very good. You're not. I'm glad you're not throwing sand into people's eyes anymore. I'm glad. I don't know.
yeah, me too.
I don't know if necessarily stopping swearing would help that, but
Yeah, I'm absolutely glad that I grew out of that. I look back on that now, and I'm just like, what was I thinking I was doing? What was I was such a weird kid. But the other sort of flip side experience of the swearing thing, just to get that thought out while I still have it, um, was I was talking with a friend of mine, and a lot of the projects that I work on for video games, they like to avoid swears as much as possible, especially because you have to go for certain age ratings for video games, and like everyone wants to get a relatively inoffensive rating.
right.
I mean, there are exceptions, but those don't tend to be the games that I work on. I tend to work on a lot of games that are more aimed at general audiences, and so it's basically like always avoid swearing. And
Mm.
every now and then I brush up against it because I don't actually have a problem with swears or people swearing. Like as much as I like have made it a habit to constrict my language use in that way, I don't think that it's a good idea to put those constraints on fictional characters. And there are some things, like I was saying, it's just easier to express with a swear.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to a friend of mine and complaining. I was like, I can't just have this character say damn.
Mm.
And like you get that particular note of like appreciation, and then there's a certain way, like there's certain ways that you just react to a certain level of aggravation that's not too high but also not insignificant. And like the different swear, they're different tools to express yourself like any other word. And I was like, I feel they've taken these tools away from me and it's very annoying. And I, in the course of having this conversation with my friend where I was talking about the different ways that I see that certain swears are more appropriate than others and the substitutions don't cut it, my friend was like just burst out laughing. And I was like, what's so funny? He was like, I've never heard you swear this much in my life.
You'd be swearing in a purely academic and educational and professional context.
Oh yes. Yes. It's actually really funny because not long after that conversation, my brother was playing one of the Final Fantasy VII remake games that they've come out with, and I was just watching him, and he had the English voices, and I think somehow he had the English, and I could see the Japanese. Um, I don't know how he had that set up, but anyway, he was playing it in that way, and I was admiring the translation. And then at some point, the characters just started swearing casually, and I was like, what a weird situation to be in. Then the other thing that you have to think about with swears sometimes, and this is sort of a like it's a gray area because how much do people even think about this? But as a translator, I tend to think about it, which is if you have a character running around in a fictional world and you use a real world swear, does that make sense for the fictional world? Right?
Mm.
If you're in a video game and there's no such thing as hell and a character says, "What the hell?" Does that make sense?
Well,
So,
I,
yeah,
yeah,
and
I don't know. I
that
guess.
bothers,
How's it
yeah,
working?
that bothers some people more than others. Go ahead.
What's it like in Bloodborne in terms of how that world deals with swearing?
Kind of interesting because I don't remember there being a lot of swears in the script. There's one particular character where I think they pared down some of the sexual implications of his speech. I'm not entirely sure why they did that, but my going theory is that some of the abuse that he hurls is just sort of more acceptable in a Japanese cultural context than it is in a Western cultural context,
Mm.
sadly. And therefore, they didn't want people because this is a character who's supposed to be not necessarily likable, but like very contrary in a way that I don't know if this is the intended effect, but when I listen to the character in English, my impression of this character is okay. This person is very contrary and um, they're very confrontational, they're rude, but they keep it within this line where it's like, okay, it's actually kind of funny. If you tell him to go, like he'll at one point ask about a safe place to go, and whichever place you tell him, he goes to the other one, just to give you an idea. And he's not supposed to necessarily come across as a likable character, but you're not supposed to be like this guy is just a disgusting piece of trash. And I read his Japanese subtitles, and I think, boy, this guy's just a miserable piece of trash. Um, and I don't that like dichotomy is very interesting to me, and I'm not sure how much I'm gonna bring that up because I can't say like I'm still trying to figure out what exactly I'm going to talk about in what detail in my current series that I'm doing the Old Hunt as opposed to Translation Born. Translation Born I talked about it already, um, but the Old Hunt I'm not entirely sure what's appropriate for it and what's not. I don't have a strong sense of what first of all of what I really want that series to focus on, and second of all what I can support
Mm.
because it's one thing to be like, this is the person who brought you Translation Born and, talks your head off about translation all the time. And the episode that is going to go live later this week as we are recording this podcast, I think I went too far. I think I went too far back towards the translation born territory because I spend like half an hour talking about the translation and I cut in with even more details and I pull graphics from my translation born series and throw them back up on the screen for the analysis that I've already done. And I feel like I tipped the balance a little bit too far than I'm comfortable with, both in terms of like, I don't know, the viewers might love it, but if I have to make every episode like that, it's no longer going to be a break from Translation Born. It's going to be Translation Born all over again, and I
Right.
can't produce that. That's why I'm making this to get away from that.
Yeah, especially on the time scale that you're releasing them at.
Yeah,
We've now gone from monthly episodes to what, one every 3 days, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
twice a week. Yeah, Mondays and Thursdays. I was originally going to make it Tuesdays and Thursdays because that was my old Chalice Chat release schedule, but I realized that the actual day of Bloodborne's 10-year anniversary was on a Monday, and I was like, all right, well, let's just be Mondays and Thursdays.
Mhm.
And I like the sort of retroactively, I like the sort of even spacing because it gives me more time when I'm scrambling to edit an episode together last minute. I can be like, okay, I've got 3 days to work on this one instead of, I have to have these two out back to back essentially.
Right. So I feel bad because what I wanted to do by the time we came to record this episode, I would have caught up with as many of the episodes as I could. But I think we've basically switched at Rook in terms of our up. Like I always used to joke to you that I'd be putting out so many YouTube videos, and then I'd just see poor Rook scrambling to try to watch everything and seeing the comments coming because Rook, you're very diligent and you write a comment almost every video I put out, especially if it's
Hmm.
like board game based. Um,
Yes.
and and I'd see you scrambling to try and keep up. I's now the opposite. I'm the one scrambling to keep up. I just keep seeing it constantly pop, especially now on like the two different discords we've got, because I've got like bots working. So every time a Rickamania video gets released, boom, it's there. The bot says, "Oh yeah, here's a new video to watch for Rickamania," and I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my god, that's another one I haven't watched." Right? Okay.
Hmm.
I watched the first one when it came out, and I was so early to that release that I was on it about 5 minutes after it got released, and it was a really good watch. But the last three
Nice.
weeks, as of time of recording, have just been absolutely pure mental for me. In terms of just too much stuff going on and not enough time to do it. And now we're like, how many episodes in? I think it's like 7 at this point. Well, by the time the viewers see this, we'll be probably about 20 episodes in. But
Yeah, yeah, it'll be even further along by the time this episode goes live. But yeah, at the moment I'm working on finishing off episode 8, and then I need to
oof.
start working like I'm on a treadmill because I already need to start working episode 9, and whew, I've got work that I'm dealing with as well, and I've got this other threat of incoming new project that's supposed to be gigantic, and ugh, it's tough to know. It's tough to balance, but I've been managing to keep up with the schedule so far.
And are you enjoying the playthrough? That's the main thing.
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm having fun, particularly when I'm just playing the game,
Yeah, I can
which
imagine.
is which is really all that I sort of intended to do. But then I have a tendency to bite off more than I can chew, and quite frankly, like there's a certain amount of me that like I think in the very first episode, the one that you watched, I started the episode and I was like, I'm not really going to talk about the lore of the translation, and then immediately I just talked about the lore and translation for like the entire episode.
Uh, and just you constantly then
As
reminding yourself midway through, I wasn't going to talk about this, but here we go.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
I said I wasn't going to do this. What am I doing?
So I actually can't wait. I want to.
Yeah.
I want to take time this week and maybe just like over breakfast every day, go and watch through this episode. They're really good fun because I don't know anything about the game apart from essentially what I've been able to pick up through. I haven't seen all of your translation born, but I guess I must have been watching them for about a year. I
Oh,
suppose
nice.
I'm trying to think. It's definitely been at least a year that I've been watching them
Yeah.
as they've come out. Maybe a little bit longer. I can't remember. But yeah, that's apart from watching those. I don't know how many be like say 20 videos of translation board
Hmm.
that I've seen. Because
Well, that
again,
would be almost 2 years. They come out. They
yeah,
come out less frequently than once a month. I try to aim for a once a month pace with Translation Born, and I can't keep it. I can't like. I think I average about 11 videos a year.
So I must be, yeah. It's in that scale of videos I've watched. Again, I just my time is spread through thin. I haven't gone back and watched the. There's like 8 years of content to go through. That's gonna take me quite a while. But apart from
Yeah.
seeing those, say half a dozen, like no half a dozen, like dozen videos or so, I don't know anything
Hmm.
about the game. So I'm really intrigued to watch it through from the beginning because I don't think it's ever gonna be a game that I'll play myself because there's just too many. Again, there's
Right.
too many things to do and play and whatnot. Um, so I'm really excited to
Yeah.
watch through it, and I don't mind that it's version 1.0 or it's an updated version, just to see the game from the beginning. Would be really
Hmm.
cool. So
Yeah. I hope you would get something out of it. Let me know what your experience is like because I cannot. I have a very hard time imagining what it's like to play that game and not know anything about it anymore. I know I've
right,
been studying it and thinking about it too much.
I guess what's the same with me with Fear of Dracula, albeit in a very different sense. There's not the same lore behind the game, but that
Right.
for the first moment you play the game, even like The Witcher 2, to a sense, even though I know the lore and things are not, I'm not so in, I've not studied it in much detail, but still,
Hmm.
there's only you can only play it through for the first time once. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, I'm intrigued to go through, but unfortunately for this episode, I haven't got a lot of analysis I can add. Unfortunately, just lack of time. But I'll try and make it a point for maybe the next episode, depending on what we talk about. If we got a bit of time to go into a bit more detail about this playthrough of Bloodborne, then I think that'd be cool. That was quite a tangent
Cool.
from Tiny Glade.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's you and me, Scott Sorg.
Yeah,
Our
exactly.
conversations go all over the place.
Absolutely. I saw the screen check. Um, so yeah, so that basically, yeah, Tiny Glade is up on screen. It's just changed. I've also I had a really nice comment from somebody inside my Discord community, in sense of the if we're doing like the background footage I had recorded um, during the summer and that people seem to appreciate that because they actually use it as sort of time markers and they can kind
Hmm.
of predict a little bit even if they don't get the timing because sometimes with these apps sometimes it remembers how much you've played through it or through the episode or through the video and sometimes it doesn't but they use that
Interesting.
as a sort of like as a timestamp they remember what the image was and then they can find the spot more or less so yeah I hope everyone enjoys the views if you're watching this on a medium that has the video then hopefully you enjoy seeing the 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 sights of Bridgemore and Tiny Glade. Tiny Glade is such a cute little game. It's so chilled out. I'm really glad I picked it
Yeah.
up and um, sort of
I'm excited. I'm excited to see it because I haven't been able to make a lot of your streams. It's sort of funny because you're saying the shoes on the other foot. I can't keep up with your content. It's not like you slowed down.
different
You
form of
sped
content.
yeah.
I think I have sped
Well,
up.
yeah, I mean you're doing more on Twitch than you've ever done.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like some of those Twitch videos are going onto YouTube as videos that I'm interested in. And it's like Fury of Dracula that I'll watch,
Mm.
um, in particular. But also you've got your Wingspan tournament videos that you're doing, and so it's like basically your YouTube content has stayed pretty consistent. Your Twitch content has ramped up, and I don't understand where you find time for it all. So I can't I can't follow along as much as I'd like your streaming stuff because I could barely even keep up with your YouTube stuff. But the Tiny Glade is an interesting game to me because I like the idea of it, but it's exactly the sort of game that I cannot stand to play myself.
Oh, I'm sure that's not true.
I,
If you'd get, I'm sure. Well, maybe not. It depends on what you like. But
I have tried several times to get into games where you need to create things for yourself, and I have never once succeeded in getting into them.
oh,
And it sort of ties into like I think I very briefly mentioned in the first episode of The Old Hunt that character creation screens are the bane of my existence.
yeah.
That's because I cannot stand the idea of sitting there and making a character that looks good. I just want to get out of that screen as fast as possible. And I'm sure Tiny Glade is lovely, and there's always a chance that that's the one, right? Maybe if I sit down and spend some time and get into it, it would be meditative. The like tools that you use to put that world together would be intuitive for me, and I would have fun shaping a digital world of my own, and it would be a blast. But I've tried to get into that experience several times in the past, and I have never once succeeded. So I'm sort of skeptical at this point. But I do like that there are other people who can do that sort of thing, and I like watching them create. So I'm very interested to see the footage for the Tiny Glade thing when it comes up on this podcast. And who knows, maybe this will be the one where you get me to try it out and I have fun with it.
Well, it was a game that got I this before I started streaming properly on Twitch. So this is around sort of beginning of December-ish, and I was looking in when the Steam sale was on, trying to find really chilled out games to play because I just seem at the moment I can't play large open world RPGs
Hmm.
or long story based stuff. I need something I can just dip in and out of, but something also that's very chilled out.
Yeah.
And I saw Tiny Glade, and it's actually quite a new game. It came out in October of last year, and it is the most zen like experience. It's just so beautiful, and I don't know how. I think it's one of those games where even the ugliest creation would look good in the game because it's just
Hmm.
aesthetically pleasing. And if you're getting stressed building something, just go and pet the sheep and everything's fine. um, and I think it's just a case of, I think it's also nice then having a Twitch audience along with you because sometimes they'll suggest things to do or they'll start saying to me, oh, there's this palace that near where I live. Can you try and maybe create a bit of that? And even if you can't recreate it completely, you'll take it. I've got in the screen that people can see right now, there's a white tower on the right hand side that got inspired by a castle, I think it is, that's in Portugal. One of my Twitch viewers recommended it, and in the real version of it, it's meant to be quite this sort of beautiful red color.
Hmm.
But then eventually, there's no red color in the game that matched, and then we end up sort of changing it to white because we thought it looked better. Um, so you just kind of go with the flow with it. And I was the same. I was skeptical as well because as much as I like building that sort of stuff, I have very poor imagination at the moment. As a kid, I was very imaginative.
Hmm.
Now as an adult, I'm really poor with it, and but I'm also terrible at following things through. Um, and I was really worried I would just stare at this game and not be able to build anything. But I've
Hmm.
really gone into it. And even I'm not playing it every day, or there's some people who play it every day, but it's a real joy to open up. And you just go with the flow of it. And if you're trying to build something, I've had it a couple times where I've tried to build something, and then whatever reason it's not clicking with me that day, and I'm like, nah, I can't build this. This doesn't look right. I don't like it. You just go off onto the other part of the map and build something else, or do something
Hmm.
different, or do some collateral, put some trees in, and then it's fine. Um, and you can make them as complicated or as simplistic as you like. There's some people who are doing ridiculous stuff who are like recreating Hogwarts and things inside the game. It's just mental. But
Yeah. I definitely there are people who've done that in other games that I've seen as like things where games where you build things and they've done incredibly impressive work and it blows me away. But that is exactly the sort of thing that I cannot do.
it's just a game you just go in, and it is very intuitive. If I can build the stuff that you're seeing on screen right now, then, and I'm not the most imaginative type, anybody can do well in this game. And the controls are very intuitive, and the way it's very spontaneous, the way that things just pop up, and the way different blocks that you're building sort of join together and things. It's very pleasing. So
That's
it
great.
might be the one, Rook. It might be the one.
It might be the one. I'm skeptical. I feel like I have enough experience with playing games that I feel like there are some experiences that just are not for me. And we talked about this in the music thing, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't have to like everything. And, everyone has a certain amount where it's like, okay, past this point, like I can't get that. And sometimes it's a sad thing, right? It's like because something that one person will find very deep and moving and powerful, I can't get into at all. And it's sad that I can't be deeply moved by that thing that they're experiencing. So, like in the case of music, and in the case of these games, right? It's a potentially like helpful, calming, meditative practice. But I don't know. I've had experiences with it in the past and I haven't liked it. Open world games, same thing for me. Like I've yet to play an open world game that I like. That doesn't mean it's not out there. Um, I'm sort of iffy on Elden Ring because it's the big new FromSoft title. I think it's still their newest one. I can't remember, but it's definitely the biggest one of their games that I haven't played, and it's supposed to be open world. And I know I don't like open world, but I like the other games that it's sort of building off of, the Soulsborne games, maybe that's going to be an open world game that I enjoy. Maybe not. I don't know. And so I'm sort of, uh, I sort of go back and forth when I ask myself, I'm going to at least try Elden Ring. Am I going to like it? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. I've yet to meet an open world game that I liked.
I think the cool,
So,
I think the cool thing too is like I think especially through the medium of like YouTube and also Twitch as well. I think a lot of my audience came from um, raids from a very particular Tiny Glade streamer. I'll give a shout
mhm.
out to Andy O'Haven on Twitch because he does really chilled out streams and building his own little village in the game. Um, but again, I don't know how many of them necessarily play Tiny Glade, but they love it for the chilled out content, and that even if they don't play it,
Yeah,
they like watching somebody play it, which I think is
that
also
is
valid.
yeah, that is the experience that I want to have, right? That's when I say I want to see your Tiny Glade stuff on YouTube, that's the experience that I want to have, where I watch the creation and get some of those chilled out vibes. I mean, it's you and me talking, so maybe it'd be more cozy if I just popped into a live stream, but
Hmm? So I did upload some of the videos making Bridgemore onto YouTube, but then I realized after a while, A, not many people watch them, but also it was just filled with lots of Twitch chat, which a lot of people would not want to
yeah,
sit through after the fact. So I've actually deleted all those videos off YouTube. But what I am gonna do is once the build is complete, I'm gonna do a standalone YouTube video. That's gonna be basically a tour through Bridgemore, and we can walk through the town, and I'll describe certain things that I've built and whatever. And maybe
yeah.
if
That's
there's
a cool idea.
anything that was like inspiration, like that castle, and there's also a chapel near Edinburgh that was a bit of inspiration. I'll pop them up on screen. I can maybe do a bit of editing for once and pop them up on screen and show people. Um, so yeah. So yeah, I think you're gonna have to just I don't know how, but amongst your busy schedule, you're gonna have to maybe find a moment to come onto Twitch where you know I'm doing some Tiny Glade and see what it's all about.
Yeah, I think that could be fun. And I think, it's nice to have activities like that that are just, relaxing and sort of fun to watch and maybe fun to have on in the background, use as a springboard for some interactions with the people in the chat. And it's a different experience when you're doing it live as opposed to when you're doing it, when you're viewing it after the fact on YouTube, like you said, right? It's like, okay, well, this conversation might be engaging to someone who's there for Twitch, but on YouTube, it's not working, right?
Right.
So,
And that's kind of the reason why I've been doing so much of the Twitch stuff. Because even though there are YouTube videos I want to make for Fear of Dracula and things, it's just too it's almost too tempting at this point just to know. Oh,
hmm
I've been quite lucky. I've got a loyal. It's a small audience I've got, but they're all very loyal. And
hmm
every time I go live, I'm guaranteed to have X number of people always showing
hmm
up to watch, even if they have to lurk and they're doing stuff in the background. They'll always put the stream on, so I'm
yeah.
not just talking into the void. Um,
hmm
and it's just too tempting every single evening, even if we're going to talk about this a little bit later with burnout and stuff. Even if I'm really tired, I just want to go online and just chat to people, and the game isn't really important at that point. Whatever it
Yep.
is I'm doing, it's more the interaction with people.
Yep. It's funny. Uh, a mutual friend of ours, Strider, um,
Okay.
he, he'll give me grief for hating Twitch because, quite frankly, it's not my favorite. Like I cannot keep the amount of stimulus that Twitch throws at me.
Mm,
I have a very hard time dealing with, and it's not just right. Okay, here's the streamer, here's the chat. It's there's all this other stuff going on the screen, or you can full screen the video, but then you don't get the chat. And if you don't follow the chat, a lot of the stuff doesn't make sense that the streamer's saying. I mean, I know that you have your video set up so that the like relatively recent chats will appear on the screen.
hmm
So maybe that's something I can do in the future. But then if you want to interact with the chat, you have to ignore everything else that's going on and type there, which I have a hard time doing because I find myself like I can only really focus on one thing at a time. And so, am I like read the chat, listen to the stream, watch the stream, type something of my own, hold on to my own thought long enough to type it into the stream chat? I end up going very, very slow. And so, someone will ask me a question. It'll take me like 5 minutes to be like, yes, I think that's a good idea.
That's only because you're trying to work around the character limits of the comments. You're just writing
Yeah,
this
there's that too.
biblical
There's so
text.
much. Yeah, there's so much shorter on Twitch. I didn't even know YouTube had a character comment limit until or a comment character limit until I ran into it.
Well, I guess you're not gonna have to find out what the one on Twitch is.
Oh, Twitch is much smaller. They tell you,
Oh,
I
do they?
think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really short,
Too
and it makes
restrictive.
sense because they want to facilitate a quick back and forth. And then, of course, you add in all the, alerts and sounds,
Yeah.
and so redeemed such and such, and here comes this raid, and it's just this constant stream of stimulus. So it puts me off.
Yeah. I mean, I think the advantage
However,
if you're doing something chill like Tiny Glade, then at least there's not so much stimulus from the gaming side, so you can cope with that stuff. A lot of it depends on the vibe of the stream.
yeah,
Some
yeah.
streams are mental, and there's like the stream last night that, as of the time of recording, I did some Roller Coaster Tycoon, and I got raided twice, and people were redeeming all the stuff in the like with the sound effects, and we had like a whole argument about which is better, the East Coast or the West Coast of the states, and people were gambling channel points on it, and so it was quite a hectic sort of stream. But others could be a lot quieter. It just depends on also the vibe of the game, and also what the streamer kind of the mood of the streamer can dictate that a little bit. But then other times
Yeah.
the audience can just go off on one. We've done some Jackbox things recently as well, and that's just been pure carnage.
Oh man,
But
Jackbox. I
but
can't
great
I
fun.
can't do that game in person. I can't even imagine that on a stream.
Oh, it's so funny. It just becomes an absolute just a riot. But yeah.
Yeah. But Strider will also joke that you're addicted to Twitch because you're just constantly on there. And it's like, yeah, you got this community of people
Yeah.
you can turn to all the time, right?
I'm addicted to the
It's nice.
community. I mean, Twitch itself is just a platform. It's a fact that I've been really lucky, and I'm really fortunate and grateful to have this little this loyal audience of mine,
Hmm.
who are always there and will even like if the only thing they can do is I mean they're so nice. They will literally just pop in and just say, I can't stay, I have to go, but I just want to say hi, and then they go.
Hmm.
That enough is just like, oh, thank you just for popping in and saying hi to me. So if any of them are listening, then thank you so much. It really makes my day. So
Yes.
that's what
Thank you.
that's what I'm
Not for
addicted
me,
to.
but for on the part of Scott Sword for making Scott Sword's day. Thank you.
Alrighty, okay. Shall we? Because we mentioned Burnout before, and that's something we've also been alluding to in previous episodes. What is that? I can't speak today either, apparently.
That's right. If whatever I have is catching, it spreads through the internet.
Shall we discuss Burnout a little bit? And
I'm up for that. It's been what's it been? 2 months, I think, since we talked like this. Was our last recording in February?
I think it was in February. I can't remember when it was in February, and again, I didn't look at the dates of the last file. But yeah, it must have been maybe towards the end, closer to the end of the month. But it's definitely at least 6 weeks anyway.
Yeah, it's been a long time because I remember we were recording and then we were like, all right, we're good for this month, and then we need to like meet for next month. And I looked at my schedule and it was like, uh-oh, when are we going to be able to record? And then you got back to me later and we were like, we need to maybe plan around April break because there's no way this is going to happen any other time. So we have burnout as a topic on the list, and we've both been, and that's why we sort of had to rush, do a super early last recording and follow up now, at least a month and a half later,
Yeah.
which is sort of less than ideal. I think the less time that we can, like, the less we have to time shift our episodes, the better it makes for conversation that our viewers slash listeners can comprehend.
Oh, you're doing it now,
Um,
listeners.
well, I told you, it's catching. I had it. I was the one infected to begin with.
uh, yeah, I think it depends on what the topic is, right? Because some things you want that audience sort of interaction. I had somebody also mention. I think it was the Terminator in the Discord was mentioning an airport story, but I didn't look it up beforehand, so I can't share it on the podcast. But yeah, I guess it depends what it is. Some things will naturally age better than others, and that's why a lot of the topics we've
Yeah.
been doing, like we had the Abroad in Japan, and then we had the Desert Island Discs. Those were things that we were able to do, and they don't age
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. Whereas if we start talking about more sort of cultural affairs stuff, which we don't often talk about anyway,
No.
which, I mean, yeah, given the time period that we're recording in, we could easily do and ramble on, but then probably by the time the podcast even gets
Yeah, we
uploaded onto
wouldn't have
YouTube,
any.
let alone gets released, things would have changed. So it's
Well,
pointless.
also we wouldn't have any listeners left.
Well, that's also true. Yeah, unless you all want to rant
This is
about it with us.
this is to keep you company. This is not to
Yeah,
discuss the state of the. You're turning here to get away from the state of the world. I hope.
I hope so.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I don't know why people are turning to this podcast. I've said it before. I don't understand why anyone listens to us.
But
But we don't have to drag that back into things.
I guess because we've had a really busy sort of month or so, which we have got a couple of other topics we want to get into, but they're going to be ones that we'll need a little bit of prep for. And at the moment,
Hmm.
you're not able to do prep, and I'm not able to do prep.
Right.
So again, I'm going to have to be very diligent and maybe not stream as much, and I'll be able to find time to do it. And we could easily do it, but yeah, it's just been a bit crazy. So we've had Burnout on the list. I think it's something that we can talk about somewhat spontaneously, but then it might need some follow up depending on if we get
Yeah.
any comments about it, or if we suddenly listen back to the episode afterwards and go, we could have phrased that better. Oh, I think we could have talked about that. But we can just sort of, I mean, the whole point of this podcast to begin with was to sort of be a mental health and stuff was not meant to be off the table in terms of
Hmm.
the discussion.
Hmm.
So it's been quite a while since that's come up. I kind of talked about that a bit more when I was doing it mostly on my own. Um,
Yes.
but
Well, it started out right because it wasn't originally, at least as far as I know, going to be a podcast. Even it was a video that you had an idea for Christmas break, where you were like, people tend to want company around this time. Maybe this video can keep people company. That's why we called it, or we. I'm inserting myself into your past. That's why you called it a video to keep you company if you need it,
right,
right?
right. And I will also say that that wasn't my unique idea. It actually came from a Twitch streamer and YouTuber that I used to watch who did the same thing. But so I duplicated the idea for my much smaller audience. But that kind of then just took off from there, really.
Hmm.
But
And
then,
at some point, I showed up.
yeah,
Yeah,
and all for the better. I definitely
I hope
think.
so.
I don't think I would have been able to keep going this long. I would have run out of stuff to talk about eventually. So yeah, it's much better having somebody to bounce ideas off and have different perspectives on things. But yeah, I think since you've come on, we haven't really discussed mental health and all that sort of stuff. So it's something we can hopefully talk about a little bit now, and we don't need to. It's not as much prep is required per se. We can
Yes.
just go with the flow and see what happens.
Hmm.
So I can't remember who brought up the idea of burnout. It might have been me. It might have been you. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. It's been on the list a long time.
Yeah, it's all
we both
smushed into one at one point.
we both had experiences with it. I think maybe you were talking about how you got burned out organizing the League of Dracula for a bit, and I was like, yeah, I've been burned out in like my professional capacity a few times, and I mean, I suppose we should sort of define our terms because I don't think burnout is an official term of any sort, and you I sort of put things into slightly different categories, right? We're talking about mental health a second ago, and I mean, I think no matter how you categorize burnout, it's got something to do with mental health. But even then, right? Like, I think you can get different levels of appreciation for different sorts of burnout. And I remember there's a podcast that I used to listen to a long time ago, and it was all about anime. And the host was talking about, I want to do an episode on burnout, but the type of burnout that the host specifically wanted to discuss was something that they only dealt with as people who are like in the sphere of people who have to watch anime as their job, even though they
Mm.
can't stand anime because they're so burned out. They're like, if you're not doing this for your living, then you can just sort of drop this. You can move away from anime and maybe come back to it, maybe not. But you can stop and then recover when you see something that you enjoy. But if you're in this state where you cannot stand anime right now because you've seen so much of it and it's all getting old and it's becoming a painful experience for you, but you have to keep watching it by the bucket load
Mhm.
because it's your job,
Yeah.
puts you at a very specific point of burnout. And that's what they wanted to discuss. And I was like, okay, I can't relate to that directly, but it's interesting. And so, sort of as a result of having heard that podcast, um, I sort of started to think about the different sorts of burnout that you can have. And when you talk about that term, right? So
Yeah.
there's the professional level of burnout, there's the like pushing yourself level of burnout. And I think those are slightly different things. But I've been talking for a long time. What do you think, Scott Sword?
Well, just while you're talking, I agree with all that. I looked up the definition. Just I was interested to see what an official dictionary would say it as burnout,
Hmm.
and I looked up the Cambridge Dictionary. They said extreme tiredness or mental or physical illness caused by working too hard or trying to do too much. But I feel that might be like another form, and I don't know if you'd necessarily call it burnout, but um, a not that you necessarily do not extreme tiredness in terms of a physical state of tiredness, but lack of enthusiasm because you've done
Yes.
something so much and you're no longer
Hmm.
infused in order to do it. Um,
Yep.
the amount of satisfaction you gain out of something doesn't justify the time and energy you put into it.
Hmm.
I think that would also be a form of burnout. I feel maybe might be able to classify it as a different word, but I feel that would also I would use the word burnout to describe that too. Um,
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, I think that's one of the hallmarks of like I think you do get to that point of mental slash physical exhaustion, but I think part of the reason you get there is because of what you're talking about, where the activity that you're doing is not working for you the way that it used to,
hmm,
and as a result, you sometimes I don't know I at least in like hobbyist burnout, right? Because there's professional burnout as well.
yeah,
We can talk about this where I've put in like 12-hour days 7 days a week for you know far too long, and it's just like, okay, this is destroying me. There's that, but there's also just the level where it's like, okay, this activity that I used to gain joy from, I'm not getting the same joy from it, and I want to put more time in to get that joy, but it's not coming, and I
right.
don't understand how to fix this, and
Vicious
you get
cycle.
totally imbalanced. Yeah.
Yeah, that's never going to work that way because the more and more you put in, that imbalance between the energy you put in and the time commitment, and then the amount of satisfaction you get out will never reach a state that you'll be happy. So you're just
Right.
putting more and more into it, and you're never going to get it out of it. I mean, I've had professional burnout too. Some of the viewers may know I studied a doctorate, which is obviously
Mm.
um, a very intense level of study. Um, the nature of my doctorate was slightly different, rather than just being stuck on my own, just researching stuff. It was more practical because it was a scientific doctorate, but still there was very much a there was no fixed working hours.
Hmm.
And obviously you're not paid, you're paid a stipend for it, but there's no contract that says you have to work X number of hours a week or whatever it is. So,
Hmm.
I'd have days I was leaving the office at 1, 2 a.m. If I had
Mm.
a paper I needed to work on, or analysis I had to do or whatever, and I'd just be working really late, and my working hours would become really, really imbalanced. I'd be arriving late into the office, but then staying really, really, really late. Um,
Hmm.
and that you can't keep that up for a sustained period
No.
of time. Um, you were talking about the 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I never let it get to that extent because
Hmm.
the one thing I'll give myself credit for during that period was I was normally pretty good in saying weekends I don't go to the office. There were
Hmm.
times where I did because I had to copy something or do whatever or send or what there's certain bits and pieces I did do, or if there were certain bits of equipment I would only be able to get access to at the weekend, then I'd go the
Hmm.
weekend to set that up and then leave it running, then go home again. Um, but I generally tried to not make it into a 7 day a week thing,
Hmm.
because again, that's just asking for trouble. I had other terrible habits during that
Yeah.
time, which meant maybe I didn't spend my free time as wisely as I should have done. But that's a different topic. We can get around to that if need be. But at least in that sense, but I was still just the nature of the even without even thinking about the working hours, the nature of the program.
Hmm.
Um, Doctorates are, especially scientific doctorates, um, you go into it expecting this, this voyage of discovery, and you're going to discover this new stuff and publish this and blah blah blah, right? And it's all going to be very exciting, but you suddenly realize your eyes get opened up to this very competitive environment, which is not very healthy at all.
Mm.
I must admit, I was quite fortunate in the sense that I was the only PhD student, not in my cohort of my year, but I was the only new PhD student in my research group for that year.
Mm.
So I was uh, any new projects always came my way. I wasn't. There were a lot of other students who I knew who would be part of maybe two or three new PhD students inside a research group inside the same
Hmm.
year. And they'd be given very similar projects, but then you'd always feel really bad if yours didn't work and the other two students did. And you're just sitting
Hmm.
there going, well, how no, why did I get lumbered with the shitty project which doesn't work, but these two get it working? You know what I mean? And that it's just,
Hmm.
oh man, and that would be the worst. So I was really lucky in the sense that I was on my own. Didn't have
Hmm.
as much support in that sense, but I was on my own. I wasn't having to directly compete, quote unquote, with anybody else, or didn't feel like I was competing with anybody else in terms of direct progression with my project compared to theirs. But then you'd still be
Hmm.
talking to other PhD students. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I've got this working," and I'd be sitting there going, "Well, I've been staring at these calculations for 2 weeks, and I still don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
How are you writing papers already?" Kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
and that's just alone, just that alone, without even thinking about all the other stuff that gets involved with scientific research or whatever. And there are benefits to it, of course, and there are great stuff that I enjoyed immensely. Um, but maybe just because of the state I was in my life as well, the negative aspects
Hmm.
really seem to dominate over the positives. Um,
Yeah. And I mean, that's something, right? Like the competitive aspect is something that I didn't have, but like it's so like interesting the way that these unique experiences can sort of twist how you go through that like experience of burnout. Because for me, like I was astonished and I try to make it so that like I don't necessarily take weekends off, but I try to make it so that I give myself some time off a week, at least one day where I don't have to do any work because of the experience I had where I didn't give myself any breaks. And even if you're not working for 12 hours, like if you just have to be on and working every single day without any like sort of like full day break, it's astonishing how much that creeps up on you.
mhm.
And I can't even imagine like if I had to be in direct competition with the other people I work on these projects, like that would drive me insane. Like
Right.
one of the best things for me about my work situation, because I'm a translator, it's a very solitary endeavor, and the best projects I've ever worked on have been projects where the people who are the managers put the individual freelance translators like me in a way that into a space where they can communicate. Like sometimes they make a group Slack, sometimes it's as simple as just a bunch of emails. And the ability to feel like I'm working with a team just goes so far
Mm.
to making it feel like I'm having a positive experience on a project. And if there's a problem, we can all talk about how there's a problem and we can all be on the same page when it comes to solving that problem. And it stands in stark contrast to when I'm on a multi freelancer project and I'm doing my thing and someone else is doing their thing. And nobody is really coordinating between us, and you wind up in these situations because I talked about this before, where translation there often isn't one right answer. There are several, and so one person will pick one right answer, another person will pick another right answer, and you can't get these two people on the same page. It's just frustrating, and so you need that collaboration.
Yep.
But being forced into a competitive environment, like that's a twist that I haven't had on my experience of burnout. So
Right. I mean, I should make it clear.
I,
It's not meant to be a competition, but it just ends up becoming that way anyway. It feels
yeah.
like you're trying to push your science to be better than everybody else's. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that's, I mean, especially more when you get to the full-time academic status, then yes, because you're having to compete for research grants and all this sort of thing. But even then, that sort of trickles down to then PhD students who are trying to, um, no, maybe not deliberately, but they're always trying to end up sort of one-upping each other in terms of, oh, I got published in this paper, or I got published in this journal, that's more prestigious, blah, blah, blah. Or just the fact that
Hmm.
my shit isn't working, and how is it that everybody else is publishing papers already? Um, it does all come together in the end. I got through it, and it
Hmm.
just so happened that as I was writing my thesis, I was also in the midst of writing, I think, like 3 or 4 papers at the same time. So it was all coming together. But obviously, when you're in the thick of it and things aren't working, then things can turn to really shit plays really fast, and it can
Yeah.
be quite a and a lot of the time when I've spoken to my friends about it, who then, a lot of their friends will then be people who are on the same PhD program as them or whatever. And every time they meet up, it just turns into just this rant fest where everyone is just bitching about their projects and why it's not working.
Hmm.
And my friend said to me at one point that he kind of got a little bit fed up of it because he just didn't want to keep hearing all that stuff. He's already got all that inside his own head. He doesn't want to then
Hmm.
go along and then hear, potentially 5 or 6 other people in the friend group all talking about the same, albeit talking about their different projects, but just throwing out the same negative vibes and things. Um,
Yeah.
so it's quite fortunate the friend group that I had that I met up with regularly during my PhD, only one other was doing a PhD. So we would often rant about our stuff a little bit, but then once everyone was
Hmm.
round the table and we were just playing board games, we could kind of forget about it and we could focus
Yeah.
on other things, which was a really nice
And that's
distraction.
that's another thing about burnout that I've sorry, I keep coughing. I hope I'm not throwing listeners off. But that's another thing about burnout that I've come to appreciate as more time has gone by, where I'll get into a large batch of work and yeah, I'm limiting myself. I'm no longer at the point where I'm so consumed by it that there's nothing else going on in my life. But you do get into this place where that's basically all you're doing.
Yeah,
And so it's not just keeping you away from other people and other connections physically, it's isolating you mentally because literally all you're thinking about, literally all you have time to think about is what you're working on. And you find yourself in this situation where you just can't write those people like who are just ranting about their particular projects not going well around the table to one another. That's probably like the chief concern that is on their mind all the time.
hmm,
And so it's like, okay, well, are we going to be able to play some board games and relax? Well, no, because literally everyone is just constantly in that state of, I have all these problems and I need to talk about them. So I think you're right. It's quite fortunate that you had some people in that group who didn't have that experience, whose lives weren't consumed by that. Because when your life gets consumed by something, the way to take a break is not to go into more of that thing. It's not necessarily like you're human, right? You've got to let off some steam. I once met up with a friend of mine who also works very hard because he's also a translator. And he was like, listen, I have been going crazy hard on this project. Like 100 hours a week, like just eat, sleep, and breathe this project. The last thing I want to do is talk about this project, is the thing he said to me at the start of our conversation. We had a whole conversation. It was all about his project because it's literally all he's been doing. He has nothing else to talk about,
yeah,
right?
hmm,
You get into this rut and it just digs itself deeper and deeper. You need to try and find ways to get out of that experience. So my like attempt, I don't know how successful I was, but my attempt through that conversation was to be like, yeah, I haven't been, burdened by any of that. So I understand you want to talk about like as much as you don't want to talk about it, you have not much else to talk about. I'm going to try and provide you with some space by talking about these other things that have nothing to do with what you're working on. And I don't know how successful I was, but it put a different perspective for me on that mindset because it's very easy to let that sort of thing become your only experience and then you can't dig yourself out of that hole.
right. I mean, I think a lot of this people can sympathize with this a lot, especially for people of a certain age who maybe yet don't have families and things. As soon as they all meet up with their friends, the topic of conversation will just naturally go on to what's happening with work, and then
Hmm.
then everyone will just start going off on one about everything that's been happening and all the shit shows they've had to deal with.
Hmm.
I guess also, I mean, I know it's not burnout related, but it's the same thing. Why I guess they always say, well, people with families just end up talking about their family all the time because it's the
Hmm.
priority focus of their life. So everything is pushed through that. Everything's viewed through that lens
Hmm.
of that's the key thing, and then everything else around it is just kind of happening in the background, kind of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, I must admit when I finished the doctorate, because because I guess as I did my undergraduate was 4 years of, as you can imagine, intensive study to try and get that degree that I needed, and then 4 years of the PhD, 3 years of experiments, and then 1 year of writing. And I wrote it under pandemic conditions as well, which is a whole other story. Um, but once I was done with it, I was just spent. I just didn't know what I
Yeah.
wanted. I had this whole trajectory of where I wanted to go, and I wanted to be a full time research academic. And then the PhD sort of opened my eyes to certain things about how that world functions, and I was just like, nope, nope, nope. That's just not. I'm a competitive person, but I'm not going to be
Hmm.
competitive for my job. I'll
Yep.
I'll compete in playing video games and board games all day long, and I've got no issue with that, or quizzing or whatever it is. But I don't want to be competitive for my job. I don't think that's
Yeah.
right. So that's just not for me. So it's partly the disillusion of the fact that I had this trajectory planned for myself, and then
Hmm.
that just disintegrated in front of me once I realized I didn't want to do it, and also just the fact I just put so much time into studying for 8 years,
Yeah.
as well as then also then the mental sort of hurdle of dealing with a long distance relationship and all that sort of stuff that comes with it. I was just done.
Hmm.
I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I just had no energy anymore to do anything. And then people who I've said this to people in my life where once I did the exam to get the doctorate, and then I was given something like 6 months or something to correct because they went through the thesis and went, okay, right, we're happy with it, but we need you to add this information. Can you make these corrections? Blah blah blah. I left it to the last minute to do the corrections because I just couldn't face looking at it. And then I
Hmm.
got it all finalized. Yep, they're happy with it. I got the doctorate. Blah blah blah. But I just couldn't look at it. And it was not
Yeah.
until maybe 2 years later when I went back to my home university and I got the PhD like the thesis properly printed with a hard
Hmm.
bound cover. That was the first
Hmm.
moment, like more than 2 years after, well, almost 3 years. No, 2 years. No, 2 years after doing the exam, 18 months or so after finalizing the thesis and submitting it and getting the little diploma that says, "Yep, you've got the PhD." That was the first time I actually looked at it and went, "Oh my god, I did a thing."
Hmm.
But still to this day, when I look at it, I won't see the achievements in it. I'll see all the struggles and difficulties and problems that went into every single part of it,
Yep.
um, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah,
But
it's terrible. And I mean, video games has this issue in a big way because there are people who uh, the industry sort of pushes them to push themselves. And they've been doing it for a long time. This is a known, well documented, very ongoing issue in video games, particularly, I think, among Western developers. I could be, it's also true among Japanese developers. I don't want to say that they're like immune because they've worked some insane hours as well. Japan in general is famous for having a crazy work culture, but um, I know that recently there was a game that came out and it was by a team that had been in the industry for like 20, 30 years and people were really impressed with it. And one of the person's reactions that I saw to it was like, this is the amazing thing about having someone stick around in your studio and make games for you for like 30 years because there's a certain amount of skills, there's a certain amount of knowledge, there's a certain amount of like perspective that you can only have when you've been working that long. And the way the video game industry by and large works is they get a bunch of people who are kids who loved video games growing up. They go to school, learn how to do video game things. They go work at a video game company, and they get completely burnt out because the hours are insane and it ruins their lives.
yeah,
And they leave the video game industry. They get much happier. They get more money. It just everything works out better for them because they're not working in video games. And video games as a result sort of they don't get that benefit of someone who's been there for 20, 30 years because they kill all their upcoming talent.
mm,
it's it's terrible. And like yeah, it's I know exactly what you're talking about. When it's like I can't even look at this thing, right? It's you don't even get the reward of your hard work. It's terrible.
yeah. Oh, you get it. I mean, I must admit, I've got it back, but it's taken a long time to get it, and it's been sort of like drip fed just through very specific things, or when people then, outside of maybe the sphere who maybe don't know
Hmm.
how a PhD process works, they go for like, oh wow, that's amazing, you got a PhD. I was like, yeah, but
Hmm.
it is, but you don't know what we went through to get it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tough one. I think especially like with the video game stuff, it depends on I suppose what projects. But I guess now the timelines for these game releases must be so um, just so intense in terms of being things being scheduled for a release on X day because there's this conference or like I was gonna say conference like expo or exhibition coming up, or you need to get it in time for Christmas or whatever that period is. And now we've
Yeah.
got the whole thing now about games being released early and they're not up to scratch and goodness what
Yeah.
else. And yeah, have you ha, ha,
Yeah. The
have you been able to go back and look at some of the games you've worked on, and then what's been your perspective on them after the fact?
well, so for the most part, I've sort of lucked out in that the video games that I've worked on I've largely been able to look back at my work on them and feel proud of the work that I did. Especially because I know the circumstances I was working under, and like if you just view it from the outside, you may think that any particular game I worked on was a mess. But for me, I'm able to sort of look back at a lot of them and be like, oh, okay, this was good. But there are certain projects where it's just like, no, no, that was a terrible. It was terrible from start to finish, and I still can't believe that this is the result. I feel like a lot of the games that I've worked on, by and large, I've been pretty happy with my work on them. Like I said, and there are some ways in which I feel like I learned I learned sort of a hard lesson about how hard I can push myself and
Mm,
what I should be prioritizing in a translation. And I mean, that's the other thing in particular about the work that you do. And they've studied this about burnout is that you don't put in better work when you're burnt out. You're doing work, but you're just sort of muddling through.
yeah.
And companies that put in, what is it, 80 hours a week, like don't actually make any more progress than the companies that put in 40 hours a week. They just feel like they're doing more because they're on that grind all the time.
Hmm.
And it's it's just painful. Um, so yeah, there are like one or two projects where I was like, that one I went too far on, and um, I can't really go back to it. But a lot of the other projects, including some of the ones I got into early on, where I was into otome games, which are like romance games aimed at like fairly young teenage girls, so like 12, 13, somewhere around there. Um, and some of those, I mean, they were giving me a ton of work and they were not paying me super well, but I'm still pretty happy with some of the things I came up with for them. There's this one like particular translation where I remember just being really pleased with how I solved sort of this difficult problem because it was presented as it was a historical satirical haiku that I had to translate. And it was the thing that made it satirical was there was this play on words where if you just read the poem on the surface level, it sounds like they're talking about the interruption of some special brand of tea, and but it's actually talking about the arrival of these ships from the United States, the Black Ships. This is a famous moment in Japanese history where Commodore Perry, Matthew Perry from the United States, shows up and at gunpoint demands to speak with the person in charge, and they quote unquote open Japan. And it's this very big moment in Japanese history. And there's this satirical haiku about it that sounds like it's about something innocuous. It's about tea, but it's actually about this event in Japanese history, these four black ships. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And I go and I look, and it's a famous poem. So there are existing translations on the internet, but those are all copyrighted. So I can't use any of the existing translations. And I remember just being very proud of myself because I sat there and I was like, okay, how can I do some sort of pun? And I can't remember the full thing anymore, but I can still remember the first line, which is when the inspiration hit me, was four steaming vessels. right? And if you hear the way I said that, you'll notice that's 5 syllables. And
Hmm.
so I'm keeping the haiku form. I'm keeping the double meaning. I'm keeping the, but even the potential tie to tea. But I'm still talking about the black ships, right? I was like, wow, I'm so glad I came up with that. And I mean, that has to have been one of the projects where I wasn't super burnt out. Because the other thing about burnout is it completely kills your creativity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why you don't end up making as much progress as you think you're making
Mm,
when you're burnt out is because the quality of work that you're putting in just goes to complete crap.
yeah. And then you have to spend longer on it because you haven't been as productive, and it just becomes this vicious cycle uh, where burnout ends up inducing even more burnout because you're having to work
Yeah,
harder to compensate, or longer, I should say, to compensate.
right.
And yeah, it just goes around like you're just a hamster on a wheel that can't get off it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there are some projects where, like I said, I can't go back to them. But a lot of the projects that I've worked on, I'm pretty happy with, at least the work that I did. And I've yet to solo a project. I've yet to like take on a contract and be like, I'm going to do this thing from start to finish. It's all me. So I don't necessarily know what it would be like to have that experience. All the projects that I've worked on have been joint efforts. And like I said, the best ones are the ones where they facilitate communication. And sadly, one of my favorite projects to work on was also one that got canceled and never came out. And,
Oh no,
and
that's the
so
problem. You got
it
that.
was like,
You got that other issue, right? It's not in your hands if
yeah,
it's going to see the light. I mean, I guess for me, worst case scenario is it doesn't get published, but at least I've still got my thesis with my work. But
right.
somebody, it's not in your hands. Somebody could just suddenly go, right, yeah, no, we're not releasing that game, or whatever it
Yep.
is you're
We
trying to
spent
say.
too much money. We got to cut our losses. Yep.
Unbelievable. Damn.
Yeah. All that work. And I think good work just down the tubes.
Mm.
It's terrible.
Oh, that's a shame. Again, you can't look back on it later. Oh, so it's so I've had it with the PhD, and then I've tried to tell myself as I've gone a little bit, I've got past that point, not to fall into that trap again. But the problem is, I'm one of those types of people who just keeps on doing more stuff, and I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe it's a perfectionist attitude, or maybe it's I can't half-ass things. It's something that I'm
Mm-hmm.
really. It's sometimes it's a bit of a problem with me. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes like if you see me on stream, I'll have a sort of like oh fuck it sort of attitude to certain things that I'm doing inside the games or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm working, I want to try to be as professional as possible. I don't want. I will make mistakes along the way, but I don't. I hate
Yeah.
half-assing things, and when I see other people in my line of work half-assing stuff, it pisses me off they're half-assing it, and it also pisses me off even more. Going, well, what the fuck am I doing? Putting all this
Mm-hmm.
effort in when people can do it in twice half the amount of time, and it's somehow
Yeah.
deemed acceptable, even though I've put in triple amount the effort or whatever. So slightly, yeah,
Yeah.
pisses me
I
off.
struggle with that. I struggle with that myself. There was one project actually where I was like, listen, if everyone else is just gonna, not pull their weight, let's see what happens if I just do like because the way that I work, I do 2 passes. I feel like you need to have like you can look at the Japanese and you can come up with the English, but there's just naturally going to be questions that arise from only knowing the immediate context, like sentence by sentence. And then after you've seen as much of the whole thing as possible, usually it's not the entire thing because I mean, the whole thing isn't ready, or the stage that I'm working on these projects. But I get through whatever chunk I've been assigned, and then I go back to the top and I go and just revise everything again with the full context in mind, with a little bit of the like immediate presence of the Japanese out of my head. Because one of the things about translation, and I say this in translation born over and over, I feel like, but translation isn't about words as much as it is about ideas.
Hmm.
And on the first pass, it's way, way easy to just focus on the words because you're looking at the Japanese, you're like, how is that going to English? And you do it.
Hmm.
When you come, I don't know about you, but when I come back and I do my review pass and I've got the full context, I try and not look at the Japanese until I've read through at least a short segment of the English. And then I am checking to make sure that I got the Japanese meaning right, but I sort of rely on my first pass a little bit more for that. And a little bit more on the second pass, I try and be like, get the Japanese out of my head. How do we express this idea in English? Does it sound natural? And I'll read it out loud to help me with that. And so I'm going back, I'm going over everything I do twice. I'm reading it out loud. I'm leaving comments about the choices that I've made because, like I said, there's usually more than one right answer in translation. So I'll be like, okay, I know someone is going to be going over my work later, so I want them to understand where I was coming from when I made this particular choice. And I'm doing all this work to make it look nice and hand it off for the next person. And sometimes I've been on projects, especially the ones where they don't facilitate communications and people are just making all these other choices. And it's just like, if nobody's going to coordinate on this, maybe I just do one pass. And I did one project like that. And I was, not only was I not happy with it after the fact, but the person who normally reviews my work went over it and was like, this is not up to your standard. And I was like, yeah, it's not. You're right. I couldn't fool you. So yeah, I had to like I had that experience once, and I was just like, never again, never again. I'm good at like I don't care what other people do, and this is I think one potential advantage to translation being such a solitary pursuit is that if I want to, I can be like, listen, those other people can translate however they want, unless again it's one of these wonderful projects where we're all talking to each other. I love those projects. Um, but if it's one of these ones where we're all like in our own little isolated cells working on our own chunks, it's like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my stuff. I'm going to do the best job I can and do it up to my standard. And whatever the other person's standards are, they can be whatever they are. Like
Right.
I can ignore that.
You only control what you can control, I suppose. That's like
Yeah,
the other way to think about it. Yeah.
right.
And that's
And
good.
it's so funny too the lesson because I have to tell myself that over and over again, right? Like it's easier to know that intellectually than it is to employ that in your life. But go ahead.
Right. Well, I'm the same. Like I flip flop all the time between only trying to stress about things that I can personally control and it influences things that I can control, and then also then the other half of my time getting pissed off at everybody else for not doing it at the same standard that I expect. And that kind of it's a really tricky
Yeah,
balance to get right too, and then
yeah. The flip side of it for me, now that I'm thinking of it, is when I'm working on a project and there's someone who I think is better than me, and it's like, uh-oh, my best isn't good enough. What am I gonna do?
oh, that's imposter syndrome now kicking in.
Yeah. Yep. It's quite a it's quite a hamster wheel.
Yeah, if you're not feeling not worrying about one thing, you're worrying about the other. I mean, imposter syndrome is something else too, and yeah, that's another bugbear of mine that cropped up during the PhD, and yeah, I
Hmm.
definitely want to try it. I try as much as possible to sort of get away from that mentality because that's a real killer. That one.
Absolutely. I put down my own Japanese abilities for years. I still do it to some extent. I feel like I'm a little bit more accurate in how I do it these days than how I used to. I think I used to go a little bit overboard and consider myself a novice, even though I had years of experience at that point. Um, so, but I do want to acknowledge that my Japanese isn't perfect, and there's still ways in which I'm learning. There are areas where I used to be better than I am now. I've talked about this before. Um, but there was one moment that I had where I was talking to someone who they did not speak Japanese. All that they claimed to hold on to their knowledge of the Japanese language was they knew how to count from 1 to 10 in Japanese. And I listened to them do it and I realized they skipped the number 5. Or no, they skipped the number 4.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "Oh, you didn't say 4." And he was like, "Yes, I did." And you count, and this is sort of a quirk of the Japanese language, is that certain numbers can be read more than one way. So this person was saying ichi ni san go, right, and skipping 4. He should have been saying ichi ni san yon or ichi ni san shi. Those are the two ways that you can read 4. But 4 isn't the only number that you can read two ways. Um, seven can be read as Nana, and it can also be read as Shichi. And so this person would skip four and then double count seven and get to 10, and it would still be 10 numbers. And I was like, oh, you skipped four and you said seven twice. And they were like, no, I didn't.
Oh no.
I know how to count to 10 in Japanese. And I was like, you're telling this to me, who has lived in Japan, as if you are the authority here? What are you talking about? And it was this moment where I was like, yeah, maybe I've been downplaying my Japanese abilities too much, because this person is overplaying theirs. And first of all, that mindset is alien to me. The idea that I would just hold on to how to count from 1 to 10 and then have someone who's lived in the country come and be like, oh, no, actually, there's this mistake that you're making. My reaction would instantly be, oh, sorry, I totally screwed up. And this person's reaction was, no, I'm right.
I say it must be such an easier life to go through with that ignorance is bliss kind of attitude.
Yeah.
I'm so not like that. I'm the same. I'll downplay myself as much as possible. If I make a small mistake, then that seems to override everything good that I do. And then in the meantime, you got people who are running around who are wrong about everything, but they're in their happy world and they're so so insistent that they're correct about everything. It must be such an easier way to live.
It must be.
um,
But in the moment, I was thankful to them because I realized, oh, this is like a bad mental attitude that I put myself in. At the same time, I was also very frustrated because it was like, I feel like I have earned this moment of authority.
yeah.
After like however many, like over a decade of studying Japanese at that point.
I think it's that the issue is it's the sense of trying to balance the achievements that you've done with also then your weaknesses, like trying to that strength and weaknesses balance, where there are people who just naturally emphasize more of one than the other. I mean, in Spanish, I'm the same, but I think also now I'm trying to be a bit better about it. I try to downplay how good my Spanish is, but I've just had too many people say to me, "Oh, your Spanish is really good," and eventually I'm just having to say, "Okay, yeah, my Spanish is pretty good." I still make loads of mistakes. I think that's always I always throw caveats in. I always say, "Oh yeah, I do speak Spanish fairly well, but I'm still learning." Or
Right.
I've only got B2. I'm always viewing it from the perspective of I can still do much better. I'm not running around like this authority. I mean, I've said it. I mean, I can't remember if I said it on the podcast or I said somebody in person, or maybe it's on a stream. I can't listen to myself speaking in Spanish because I cringe at it because I don't have the right accent. I just hate it. Now I've gotten used to be able to listen to my voice in English.
Yep.
Listening back for Twitch and YouTube, you must be the same for.
Yeah, just constant exposure. You get used to it. I agree.
I can't.
But
listen to
I'm the
myself in
same way.
Spanish.
I can't do when I speak Japanese, it makes me cringe. Like in the moment. I didn't even need to hear it back. In the moment, I'm like, oh, I botched that.
Oh no, I think I speak fairly well, but then the minute I hear it back, I think, oh my god, no, nope.
Yeah.
You made loads of mistakes, and you don't sound like a native, and even though that doesn't really matter, but I've talked about it before, but pronunciation is more my focus rather than accent. I'm not the best sponge for accents, even in native English languages. I'm not a good sponge for accents. I can't impersonate people very well. But
Right.
I think I talked about it in previous podcasts, I think, in terms of the language learning. As soon as I learned that there were very strict pronunciation rules in Spanish, I really said to myself, right, I'm going to get this right. I don't want people to look at me like I'm an ignorant foreigner and I can't pronounce words correctly. We had that other person in the class who had obviously skipped that lesson and was just like the ignorance is bliss type of character who was just reading the sentence out in whatever they wanted. I was just cringing at it the entire time. But there are times where I have to be honest and say no. I've done some stuff in my life. I've got achievements. Let's try and play these up a bit more. And I think it also helps when you've got like a life partner with you who is able to see past that a little bit. And my wife, she, bless her heart, she'll sit there and go, no, you should be proud of yourself. You've done good stuff. I mean, she's exactly the same as me, where she's sometimes can get really frustrated at other people who don't. We're basically the same people, but we end up when she's stressed about something or she's got burnout or whatever. I'm the one consoling her and
Hmm.
trying to show her the other way of thinking about it. And then when I'm frustrated, she's the one telling me off about it and getting me on the right path again. Um, we just switch roles depending on what the situation is. But having that sort of person in your life really helps because they're able to see past that,
Hmm.
past your own frustrations, and they can. And the number of times she says to me, "But you did really well when you did that. Why are you so negative about everything?" So
Hmm.
that can definitely help. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
Hmm.
Um,
Agreed.
so I'm trying to think. Yeah, so the burnout. You're talking about the Fear of Dracula stuff. I did get really burnt out with the first league.
Hmm.
So this is back in 2022. Would that be right? Yeah, I guess
Hmm.
so. I think I said 2023 by mistake in a video recently. I think yeah, it's 2022 because I started. Yeah, it was over 3 years ago that I joined the community. I've had 3 leagues, so that would make sense. Yeah, because in particular with that league, I felt there was a lot of pressure on me because if this tournament went to shit, then there would never be another one, and I'd be
Right.
remembered as the guy who tried to run a tournament and it went to shit.
Hmm.
um, and also just because I have like really high standards on myself anyway. I want things to be
Hmm.
done a certain way and blah blah blah. I did have another member of the community helping me out, but a lot
Hmm.
of I was like the face of it.
Yeah.
My partner in crime who was helping me out with sort of the organizational stuff was Peter C. Lee, who's still an
Hmm.
active member of the community, even though he doesn't play in tournaments much these days. But I was still the face of it. It was my name that was attached to the tournament. It was my name that was advertising it. I decided to organize it, blah blah blah. So there was a lot of pressure on me to make sure that went well, and then also I was competing in it.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I remember by the end of that tournament, I think also that the problem is a lot of it is trying to separate burnout from other mental health issues because they can just end
Yeah.
up compounding each other. So,
Yep.
very fortunately, well, I guess, well, I should back up a tiny bit. I've said it before this podcast that I have had, I mean, I had imposter syndrome during the PhD and I have had depression. Very
Hmm.
fortunately, I'm in a and I made a joke recently on my Discord community that I didn't realize it at the time how serious it was, nor have I got
Mm.
treated because I'm a man. Um, but I'm very lucky now. I'm in a spot in my life where that's no longer a day to day concern.
Hmm.
As soon as I was able to move over to Spain, a lot of that went away because I was with my now wife, who obviously that
Hmm.
aspect of it was a huge importance for me, and being separated by distance from her was a definite cause towards it. But there are other factors as well,
Hmm.
as alongside all the stress of studying and PhD and all that sort of stuff, and also just things with me. But
Yep.
what I had since then were just natural lulls where I'm fine, and then I go into a sort of a depressive slump, and these slumps can
Hmm.
kind of last between a couple of days to maybe a couple of weeks at a
Hmm.
time. Um, and I think because I was again with just work naturally, I just put a lot of effort into the work and I had quite an intense schedule, and then I was trying to play in the tournament, and I was trying to organize it, and blah blah blah. And I felt it coming as it was sort of approaching the ending point of that tournament. Um, I could feel this lull coming. I don't know if it was burnout or if it was depression or both. It was hitting something was hitting me, and I could feel it
Hmm.
coming. I remember I was doing a bit of in-person work, and I felt it coming. I was like, "You're gonna hit me at some point in the next few days. You're gonna really hit me with whatever this is." And then it hit,
Hmm.
and it hit right on the last weekend of the tournament when I had to play a game, and that was the only footage I've ever recorded that I refuse to put up on YouTube. Um,
Wow.
because I listened back to it and I could hear like the burnout and the depression in my voice, and
Yeah.
I said to myself I cannot upload that. So what we
Yeah.
had to end up doing was Roscoe actually, even though he didn't know it at the time, I think for these reasons, but just by pure coincidence, Roscoe, one of our mutual friends from the community, he hadn't
Hmm.
watched the game. So I said to him, "Oh, I want to re-record the commentary would you like to join me? And we'll analyze the game afterwards. And he's like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So that's how that footage ended up being on YouTube. But the raw footage of me playing the game, I don't know if I even have it. I might have just deleted it completely. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember. But that's the only time I've ever refused to upload a video, just 'cause I could hear it in my voice, and I'm just like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 can't. I can't.
Yep.
I can't put that out there. Um, and it put like a real sour note to the end of the tournament for me because I did end up winning it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that last game I played awfully just because my head was not in the game at all. And then
Mm-hmm.
also then worrying about there are other things going on with the tournament. There's some admin issues and then blah blah blah. So I was just spent again after it.
Yeah.
But that, fortunately, I was able to recover pretty quickly, and we had a lot of really fun stuff over Christmas. But again, maybe that was not necessarily just burnout, but maybe it was just a depressive lull that hit me at the wrong point. Um, but
Yeah. You get the compounding factors. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think.
I mean, I can relate to a good amount of that. Like, I don't, as far as I know, I don't have the depressive lulls that you're talking about, but I do definitely get to points where I get burned out and I'm not necessarily aware of it.
Mm,
There are like particularly when I'm going into like stretches where I have work, where I have a lot of work but not like I'm basically at my maximum schedule that I set for myself after I was like that was too far.
mm,
It's like I went too far a couple times, let's scale that back a little bit. And so now I have a different sort of maximum that I allow myself, and it's better, but if I'm working at that maximum it still burns me out, especially if it continues for more than a week.
mm,
It gets really hard. And there have been times where I feel like when I'm working on the project, I'm still going, right? I'm still firing on all cylinders. And then I'll go and I'll be going to like a family function or something. And all I can do is sit and stare at the wall.
mm.
And I'm just not in a space to engage with anyone. Nothing hits me. I'm not getting like joy from anything. And I'm just sitting there and it's like, oh, I'm burned out.
Yeah, been there.
How
Yeah,
did that happen?
you feel like you're having almost an out of body. You're present in the room, but you're not present in terms of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, been there quite a few
Yeah,
times.
and it usually takes me like the entire length of whatever function it is to crawl out of that place. And I get back and I'm like, oh, nah, I'm starting to feel animated, and everyone's going home. I'm like, all right, well, that was that. um, sometimes, in fact, other people would be like, oh, are you feeling burnout right now? And I'm just like, am I? Oh, I guess I am. Yeah, I think I am.
Mm,
It's kind of it's funny that I have such low self-awareness about that sort of thing. Like it definitely comes, right? There's a stage where you can't ignore it, and it's just actively ruining your life. But there's also this like weird intermediate stage for me where it's like I feel like I can still do this, and then I try and do anything but work, and it's like,
no, I
just
can't.
like,
Yeah,
yep,
you're
can't actually do anything.
in the denial phase. No,
Yep,
I haven't got burnout.
that's
What are you talking about?
that's a good, yeah.
Yeah,
Denial phase is definitely what it is.
I think that's important though.
Yeah.
'Cause, like we all have to kind of go through things and with experience set our own limits in terms of time
Hmm.
or energy input or whatever it is, and you everyone knows what their own boundaries are, hopefully, and we don't have to cross them
Hopefully.
too often. um, I've become a little bit better with that just in general, where there are certain things I want to do, and even now with the like it could be professionally, I still work to as high a standard as I can, but I
Hmm.
also try to tell myself if I can't do everything, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then with the Fear of Dracula stuff, fortunately I've got two admin helping me, so they can take a little bit of the burden off me. But
Hmm.
there are loads of things I want to be doing, but if I realize I don't have the time to do it, then I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to stress
Right.
about it. And the only problem is then when people say, "Oh, why haven't you done this? Why haven't I done this?" I just have to turn
Hmm.
around and go, "I haven't had time," or
Yep.
"I've had time, but I haven't had quality time," and that's the
Right.
difference. I feel a lot of
Yeah.
people. Oh, there you go.
I think it's really easy for people to look at like a schedule and be like, but you physically had the time to do this,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it's tricky because you have to then explain to them, no, I really didn't. I really did not, right? Like there's a certain amount of time that I just cannot be productive. I can't be on that treadmill, right? I just don't have the emotional, mental space for
Yeah.
it.
Or if you do, then other things start slipping, right? I mean, even in
Yes.
the last couple of weeks, I've got my wife and I have got a week off now, fortunately, after the time of recording. But the last 2 or 3 weeks have been an absolute disaster. I mean, we are barely, we'll walk into the kitchen one day and see dirty dishes and stuff that have been piled up for about 3 or 4
Hmm.
days without being touched, and going, when am I going to have time to wash these?
Yeah.
um, and even, I mean, I know people could be like, well, you're streaming most nights. So it's like, yeah, but certain tasks need certain types of input to do, and
Hmm.
sometimes you can't face doing basic chores around the house,
Yeah. Oh
or
yeah. Basic shorts is a big one for me too.
yeah, but you have to, because otherwise the place becomes a dump, and then that makes things
Exactly.
worse. But it's a yeah, it's a really tricky thing, and people say, "Oh, well, make time." It's like, well, yes, but something's gonna have to get cut from elsewhere. You can't be productive 24/7,
Right.
because you're just gonna collapse in a heap eventually. Um,
Yeah. There was a period in my life where I was sort of in pursuit of the perfect day, where I would just, I had this idea in my head of what the ideal sort of lifestyle for me was going to be, and I should always be able to hit it. And I realized after probably far too long that I was just forcing myself into an unrealistic situation, and I needed to relax my standards
and a routine you
because
can
it's
keep.
yeah, it started to be like, oh, I haven't kept up with this routine, therefore I'm a failure. And so I start to like reinforce this negative mindset on myself. And it's like, no, I can't do that. Can't think that way.
Hmm.
I need to reorient. And that's the other thing, right? You were talking about, I meant to come back to this a little while ago, but sort of slipped my mind. But I've also put videos on the internet. There are some episodes of Translation Born where I don't necessarily know if other people can get this from the way that I'm talking, but I, listening back, can still hear it. Where I'm like, yeah, I was burnt out when I made that episode.
Hmm.
I pushed myself too hard at the start of that series. I didn't know what it was going to be, and I didn't know how long it was going to take me to make an episode. I didn't appreciate the fact that I couldn't just like I took the idea that I made the first episode in about 2 weeks, and so I thought, okay, I'll come out with an episode every 2 weeks. And that was a very bad idea because it gave me zero time to take the space that I needed to recover, to just enjoy the fact that, okay, I released an episode, I don't have to worry about that for however long. And if I spend too long just trying to hit the, you know, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, every single one of those internal deadlines of mine, it would get to the point where I would feel like a failure because I was constantly slipping, and I would be slipping by like a day or like a couple days and then a week. And it was just like, I'm putting myself into this continued state of a failed mindset, and that is killing all of the joy that I'm getting out of this project.
Yep.
And why am I doing this? I'm doing this for my own benefit. Like I think doing translation born makes me a better translator. I'm doing it for other people's edification. I think there are other people out there who are interested in translation, who are interested in Bloodborne, and who are interested in the way that those things interact with each other. And I think that those people get something out of my videos, and I'm actually doing them a disservice if I'm making myself miserable making this series and feeling bad about it all the time. And yeah, there are certain episodes of that series where I've re-listened to it from time to time to be like, okay, I need to put in captions, which is another thing that I feel bad about because I wish I could have made more progress on the captions than I have. But if I let myself worry too much about that, then it gets back to that same point where it's like you can't just constantly be beating yourself up. So, be it for the captions or be it for the index that I created or all these other reasons, I go back to previous episodes. There are certain ones that I listen back to and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I feel probably not as bad as the Fury of Dracula footage you refused to show, but approaching the point where it's like, should this stay up?
Hmm.
But again, I don't know how obvious that is to someone if they're not me. But I can definitely hear it in my voice where I was like, I was pushing myself too hard on this, and I don't like the points I'm making, and this is a hard episode to rewatch.
I think a lot depend. I mean, yeah, I think a lot also depends on how much a person. I mean, we're always inside our own heads, so
Yeah.
we know what we were thinking at X, Y, Z moments. But I feel maybe in a case like you, where you're releasing videos on it's a regular basis in the sense it's scheduled more or less, but it's
Hmm.
not. You're not posting a video every day,
Right.
right? It's only per month kind of thing. So people don't have this continual exposure to you, so they might not
Hmm.
realize that maybe there's an off episode or something. Whereas if you've got someone like a streamer, type the number of
Hmm.
streamers who have crashed and burned just because of burnout or tiredness of a particular game or in general or whatever, and then you hear
Yeah.
people if they've grown up or they've been a regular viewer of somebody for a very long time, that's when you start getting the comments coming in. Yeah, are you burnt out? You're
Hmm.
not the same as you used to be,
Hmm.
and that's I think that's maybe the thing. Whereas maybe with your content, you might be able to hide it a little bit better, just because of the nature of it. Um,
Yeah.
I guess
I don't know. Like I said, I literally cannot imagine how it feels to other people. I just know that there are certain episodes I rewatched and I was like, oh, I was super burnt out when I made that episode.
I think probably the only way someone would, I suspect, probably the way that people would notice it would be if they binge watch all of your episodes in a row.
Yeah, probably.
And they're able to see the quality from one video to another in a very short
Hmm.
period of time. But if you release a video at the beginning of the month and then you release another one in the next month, that's quite a long gap, and people might have
Yeah.
forgotten not what happened in the previous episode in terms of the pitch of your voice or the energy that you were portraying or whatever. Um, that wouldn't be so apparent, perhaps.
Right. And I mean, initially it was the 2 week thing, which I kept up for longer than I should have. The reason it became a month was I was like, I'm just going to double it, right? I want a schedule that it's relatively easy for people to remember. I feel like a month is easy to remember, but difficult to internalize. It's just such a like fairly long period of time that it's like, okay, I can remember that Translation Born is going to come out once a month, but I don't feel it necessarily the way that I feel, okay, this is going to come out every week
right,
or every day.
right, 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 right.
Um, so I was happy. I think I settled on the right thing because it gives me enough time to decompress after the stress of finishing an episode, and then it gives me the ability to go back in with renewed energy and gives me some flexibility if I get a really crazy busy job at work. I can usually, not always, because this is some of the reasons that the episode slips, um, even today. But I can more easily be like, okay, I get hit with a bunch of work, but I know it only really takes me 2 weeks to make an episode if I like buckle down and go production mode. So um, it's given me just the level that I sort of need to be able to maintain. The 2 weeks thing, there was no margin, and that was killing me. So,
Mm,
and even then, right, like to the point you were actually making, I think if you were watching it every 2 weeks, that's also sort of a difficult schedule to internalize the way that someone was like feeling from episode to episode, because 2 weeks is just a fairly decent stretch between things.
mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're putting out daily stuff, then
Yeah, that's where you really see, and I like you're talking about Twitch streamers, which I don't really watch that many of. I don't think I watch any Twitch streamers regularly, actually. Um, maybe there is something to my hatred of Twitch. But yeah, the people who are just putting themselves on the internet 6 hours a day every day for uh, everyone out there to find if they want to, like those people, you're gonna notice if they're having an off day.
yeah, yeah, and that's why with like again, I kind of set at the very beginning. I set this schedule of right, it's gonna be Monday and Wednesdays. They're
Hmm.
guaranteed. Everything else is up for grabs. I'll just see how things go. But I've ended up streaming almost every day.
Yeah.
Certain weeks, just depending on what's happening. The only nights I'll probably take off will be if I'm out and playing my own Free of Dracula tournament games. Um, or if I'm recording with you, depending on what the time is or whatever. But again, there were certain periods where I really wanted to stream because I wanted that interaction with people. But then
Hmm.
I had to write in in the Discord and say to people, I can't stream tonight.
Yep.
I'm just too tired. And again, I'm
Hmm.
really glad that I didn't push myself to stream because then that affects then the next stream and then affects the next stream and then so on and so on. So yeah,
Right.
you have to have boundaries. I just go, nah, I can't do that.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes you can power through. Like I had a stream last night where I was actually really tired before because we did a Fear of Dracula tournament stream
Mm-hmm.
from 8 until I don't know, like half 9ish my time, and
Mm-hmm.
then I told everybody, right, stay tuned. I'm going to stop the stream. I'm going to restart because I've got Roller Coaster Tycoon Monday starting. Um, and I was really worried when I went into it. I actually picked a quicker scenario because I thought, oh, I don't want to get bogged down in a long scenario and then I get too tired and I can't carry on. But in the end, I
Mm-hmm.
end up doing just as long as almost I normally do because I end up by the end I was getting
Wow.
really into it. But at the beginning, I didn't have that certainty, so I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
commit myself to something really long that I wouldn't be able to then follow through. Um, so it just yeah, I think again with experience, you just have to try to pick your moments for things and just realize you can't do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, as I said, with Fear of Dracula stuff, there's just so much stuff I want to be doing, and then even then now, like I'm trying to potentially transition with work, but I'm also doing the work that I already have, and then I'm streaming most nights, and then doing sort of prep for in-person work, which obviously you don't see on my schedule. When
Mm-hmm.
you see my timetable, you go, "Oh, you got loads of time." I was like, "Well, yes, but there's also lots of time that I'm preparing to do in-person work."
Right.
And then trying to be a functioning human being and go to the supermarket and eat well and all this sort of stuff. And suddenly
Yep.
the time evaporates very very quickly.
It
Um,
sure does.
so um, I maybe I'm burnt out right now, but I don't know it. But I don't feel like it. I am just
Mm.
I am physically quite tired, but I'm not mentally burnt out. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's okay. It's when mentally you're burnt out when it becomes a problem. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree.
I think the advantage is now like a lot instead of doing YouTube, which again I mean I think YouTube's a great medium and you can do some really cool stuff like you're doing with all the edits and things and make a really sort of
Mm-hmm.
polished sort of video. But the advantage I'm finding by doing the stuff I'm doing now is I've got a lot more interaction with people, which really
Yes.
carries through
Mm-hmm.
um, and makes allows me to do it for longer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's a big difference to having that interaction with people rather than just this solitary. I'm going to record a video, or I'm going to make a PowerPoint or a script or whatever it is you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely, it's maybe not. It's yeah, as I said, the stuff I'm doing is nowhere near as polished as the things that you're doing or some of the videos I've come up with for strategy guides for Fear of Dracula. But it's much easier to power through it, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I've got a community who tell me off if I'm going too long, if I'm too tired. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think the advantage would. I think the burnout thing too is then you said it kills your creativity, but also um, I feel it really kills my ability to engage in new things. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
or or maybe
And it isolates you, right?
yeah,
Because you can't connect to people. You get moments like those family functions I was talking about where you're there physically, but you're not there mentally. And that's exactly actually what you need, right? You need that connection with other people who are there.
yeah. Or I find I get really obsessed with things, but for very short periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get really obsessed into listening to music, but then that'll be instead of being this nice sustained period where I'm always listening to music. We talked about music before, right? And how important it is for me. But I find then I
Yep.
don't actually listen. I listen to music for a little bit, and then suddenly music disappears. Or
Yeah.
I get really obsessed with a particular video game, and then a week later I've moved on to something else. There's not this sustained interest in
Yep.
things, which I feel is a real
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, that's very true. Like I feel like in general, I feel like it completely destroys your sense of time because like whenever I get super busy, it feels like I go through a time warp.
Hmm.
And I've talked to people where it's like they're like, "Oh yeah, my birthday's coming up." And it's like, "Is that next month?" And then I realize, "No, it's like a week from now." And the past 3 weeks have just disappeared because I've been so busy. And it's like, "Oh, whoops." But like when you're in the level of burnout where you're just doing something all the time, right? That's all that you have on in your mind. And then you try and focus on anything else. You're right. It totally saps your ability to do that for any reasonable, like sustained, enjoyable period of time. So it's sort of robbing you of your present as well as robbing you of your sense of passing time at all, at
Right.
least in my case.
And you're looking for that. I mean, again, it's the thing too now with I guess maybe the I don't know what should we call it, the TikTokification of everything, where everything's all really short now and instant gratification,
Yeah.
which I'm definitely a trap I'm falling into, and I'm really trying to
Mm.
I'm trying really hard not to doom scroll all the time, but that can be very hard to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it just you can't sustain enjoyment for something for a long period of time. But this is actually why I feel the Twitch stream is actually really helping me, because I have been doing, even though I'm switching between games a lot, I've got this ongoing project with Tiny Glade, I've got this ongoing project with Fear of Dracula and another game I'm playing through and so on. And then it means also there's like that presenteeism, which I would normally be against. I don't like presenteeism, especially in a work environment. But I think actually now I'm
Mm-hmm.
coming around to the idea that actually presenteeism is a good thing. Because it
Mm.
actually makes you focus, it makes you accountable. Um,
Yeah.
but again, it's not in the sense of you must do work. It's also that
Mm-hmm.
enjoyment. You commit to something not just for you, but because you've also got an audience watching you do it. And I'm
Right.
not doing it for them. I mean, I am making it for them because I love having an audience. I want them to, if they're doing this podcast or my Twitch streams or whatever it is, I want them to gain something out of it. If it's company or information or an educational thing or enjoyment or whatever it is. But I'm also doing it for me. I like what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. I wouldn't do it otherwise. But it makes it easier to commit when you know you've also got somebody else alongside you who is watching you or is participating with you or whatever that
Yep.
is. So the fact that I've spent 40 hours doing this Tiny Glade thing, that would have been inconceivable for me, I feel, without either doing it on Twitch or without a huge mental readjustment or a huge lifestyle shift in terms of how I commit to certain things. I'm also now reading a book. I hope you're proud. I mean, I remember telling you that I brought over all these books in the summer, and then I haven't touched any of
Mm-hmm.
them. I'm actually now reading a book. Actually, not one of the ones I brought over,
Isn't
but
that how it goes?
isn't that how it goes? But it's because for my Twitch community, for giving some extra content to the people who do sub, I discovered it through another chat, actually through Andy O'Haven again. I'm copying a lot of stuff from him, but he's got a nice little community over there.
That's
Doing
good.
read throughs of books, because
Mm-hmm.
it is very soothing. He read the first chapter of Harry Potter, and I listened to that, and that just sent me off to sleep immediately.
Nice.
Which was not an indictment on his reading style. It was very soothing.
Yeah.
So I suddenly thought, well, that might make me read, but obviously I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for anybody else, and I'm not doing it to like you must read.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's a way that I can encourage, I don't want to say force myself, encourage myself to read,
Mm-hmm.
then it can work. And I've read,
Yeah.
I'm reading. I don't know if you know the book. It's called The Thursday Murder Club.
I have not encountered that book before.
It's by
Sounds interesting.
British author called Richard Osman. It's becoming quite famous now. There's like four of these books, I think, and it's
Hmm.
actually being made into a Netflix series. But it's
Oh wow.
about these. Well, from what I can gather so far by the synopsis and the three chapters I've read, but these four characters in a retirement village in the county of Kent in England who are going to go off and solve a murder
Hmm.
and go off investigating as they do.
Very Miss Marple, Agatha Christie type
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. It's got that vibe, right? And obviously they're all old people in a retirement home, so they've obviously got their own quirky behaviours and goodness what else, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's one chapter in particular I couldn't record because I was just laughing at it so much. Just the interactions between them was very real and very amusing. And I've put up a couple of them onto the Discord already. And again, there was somebody who's in that community who was saying to me, because I did make a point. Again, I'm having to experiment. It's almost like you with the translation board. How much effort do I put into this thing? And for me, it's in terms of how do I record this? I'll try and record it in one take because obviously I don't want to be rereading the chapter over and over because then I'll lose enjoyment for it. But obviously I can't burst
Mm-hmm.
out laughing for because you know me when I start laughing I can't stop laughing. Um, so
You and me both.
so I have. I mean, how am I going to do it? So I'm going to try and make sure I pause so I can laugh and then carry on reading. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and but this person in the community did say to me, "You need to make it enjoyable for you. Don't make this ridiculous exercise where you have to read it 10 times to get it a perfect
Mm-hmm.
take." And I don't want the perfect take. I'm going to mispronounce stuff, and I'm going
Yeah.
to probably chuckle in the middle. But I'm just going to try and find a nice balance. Again, I'm just experimenting with it, like you're doing with the translation board, the playthrough series that you're doing.
Yeah. The
Um,
old hunt. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. I feel like it always takes me a little bit of time to find what a series is going to be. And I totally understand that you're starting this new project and it's going to take you a little bit of time to find the perfect method, right? So
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense to me.
Um, and the same
Yeah,
too.
maybe I'll check out the Thursday Murder Club. What was it?
Yeah, Thursday Motor Club. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if
I
you've,
got it.
I mean, I'm sure we can. We'll find a way. But yeah, I've been also playing around with Discord and discovering aspects of Discord I didn't know. Did you know that you can link your Twitch and Discord accounts?
I had no idea.
I had no
But
idea
that's
either.
because I'm never on Twitch.
Well, I'm on Twitch and I didn't know it until I joined that Andale Haven community. And they're like, you could link your
Huh.
Twitch to Discord, and you can, if you're subbed, you can have a access to this section of the Discord that is exclusive to subscribers. I was like, what? Is that a
Ooh.
thing? So that's what I've done.
Well, that must be how they do, because I know there are some places that I follow. They do like Patreon exclusive Discord stuff.
Mm,
So
yeah.
they must do something like that for Patreon as well.
Well, I think maybe the way I mean I don't know, but I my guess would be for me for Patreon, then through the Patreon website they'll just have a link to a Discord
Oh,
that's
maybe.
exclusive, maybe. Um,
Yeah.
but the way I've got it is
I've
like
never joined any, obviously.
yeah,
So.
but I've never used Patreon, so I don't know. But the way I mean I didn't want to have a Discord that was hidden behind a paywall because
Right.
again, if the objective of the stream is to keep people company when they're
Hmm.
not listening to this podcast, obviously. Um, I don't want their ability to talk to me to be governed by whether they want to subscribe or not,
Yeah.
or
Or pay you.
if they can subscribe or not.
Yeah. Or
Um,
pay you. Right.
yeah, exactly.
It's such a weird position to be in, where you're essentially being asked to charge access to yourself
Yeah,
and how much you want to do that. It's kind of weird.
it is weird, and my objective is not to make money from it.
Right.
So I'm not being governed again. It's not my job. So I'm not having to think in this whole way about how can I, how can I promote myself and how can I monetize myself and all this sort of thing. I don't
Hmm.
want that. It's there if people want to subscribe, but they don't have to.
Yep.
Obviously, I can't deny I get a hit of the dopamine when they do, but at the same time,
Hmm.
I get a hit of dopamine when they come into the chat and just say hi.
Hmm.
So for me, it doesn't matter what sort of level people interact with it. I'm very happy that they're just there watching anyway, even if they're just lurking away and they don't say anything. But then I've had people comment back after, even though I didn't know because they weren't in the chat or whatever. They'll then come into the chat 10 streams later and be like, oh, yeah, I've been watching some of your streams, they're really good, kind of thing. So, and I can see how many people are watching, even if people are lurking away. So I know there are people there, even if they don't want to say anything.
Hmm.
But again, I feel it's only just because if people are wanting to pitch a little bit, and again, a lot of them they just say, "Oh, because we don't want the adverts," which is I can fully appreciate that, and I'm trying to also manage the adverts in a way that means they are not as disruptive.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I didn't even mention the ads.
yeah,
That's
if I could,
another reason I
if
don't like Twitch.
yeah, uh, I mean the thing is, I like the affiliate status because you gain a lot of additional stuff, and again, maybe this is stuff that you don't like about Twitch, but you have these funny sound effects. Which the people can interact with because now there's quite a lot of memes in my community, so people are pandering to that, which I like.
Hmm.
We're doing a thing actually, so I play the electric bagpipes on the stream.
Yes.
So we did a thing where people could build up channel points. So channel points are these free resources. You don't have to pay for them. You gain them
Hmm.
quicker if you subscribe. You don't have to. Just by watching the stream, you obtain these channel points just
Hmm.
freely, and then you can use them to do certain things, like to play a sound effect or whatever. But what I did do was to have it that if people accumulated a certain amount, then I'd play the electric bagpipes on stream. But what I ended up
Oh,
finding
nice.
was people were just accumulating all their points and wanted to save it for bagpipes. And it was every stream was getting interrupted by bagpipes, which I wasn't complaining about, but it was just very funny. And just people had like 20k points in the bank, and they weren't spending
Wow.
on anything. And they were saying we want to do a whole stream. So then I discovered just by talking to somebody else that you can set up community challenges, so people can instead of donating for a one-off play the bagpipes. I set it up that there was a
Hmm.
huge target of if it's like 120,000 points or something, but people could chip in as many points as they wanted, up to a
Hmm.
certain amount per stream, and then once that whole pot was met, then in this case, I would do an entire stream of bagpipes. Um, so I feel that's been a much better way to do it. So people can chip in as much as they like, and they don't have to worry so much. If they can only watch 10 minutes of the stream, they can still chip in a couple hundred points, so they feel like they're contributing towards it. Um,
Yeah, that does seem like a much better way to go about it. In fact, I think I joined one of your streams just as you hit that community goal.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was on the Fear Jackal one.
Relatively,
Yeah.
yeah, relatively recently.
So we actually got to do that this week, so that's gonna be fun. How did that came up?
Nice.
I don't know how that came up in terms of the topic. Oh yeah. So the reason why I like the affiliate is because you got those channel points access, so then there's a lot more interaction with the community because you can do fun stuff through that. You can have custom emotes, so we've had quite a lot of community just naturally over the course of the audience being there. We've come up with memes or we've talked about our pets or whatever it is, and then they've become emotes and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's great.
So there's a lot more. It's now becoming a lot more personalized, which I really
Hmm.
like. So all that stuff gets uh, is available to you once you unlock affiliate status. But then obviously the ads also come with it.
Hmm.
So it's a way of me trying to work out, right, how can I make these ads as less of a pain in the neck as possible for people. So
Yeah,
it mean
that's the thing that really gets me is not the not how you make them less of a pain in the neck. I think that's just, the inevitability of having to navigate that situation. The fact that Twitch, like, even if you aren't necessarily looking to make money off of the people who are watching you, Twitch is sort of making money off of the fact that people want to hang out with you.
hmm,
You've built this nice community, and Twitch is going to run ads on it. You can't opt out. It's sort of like I don't do YouTube for money, so I don't have any sort of ad thing set up, and I don't really want to set up any ad thing. But YouTube, at a certain point, I can't remember exactly when this happened, but there was a certain point where YouTube was just like, you don't get a say in the matter. If we want to run ads on your channel, we will do it, and we will take the money if you're not interested. And I hate that they did that. It's like, why are you're just going to take my money if, like, theoretically, right, if I did decide to make money on YouTube, then it would be like just a certain amount of my money just going to someone else for some reason because YouTube decided to turn on ads when I didn't want them. And it's like, at least give me the option to turn them off, please.
right. At least it was then the way to think about they're on, so I may as well benefit from it. I think the other issue is I think because on YouTube the threshold to gain like to switch on monetization is much higher relatively speaking than Twitch.
Yeah, yeah. But that doesn't stop YouTube from making money off your
Well,
videos.
that's very true.
So you can be this is the bad thing about YouTube. You can be like working the grind trying to make it so that your channel is monetized, and before you hit those standards, YouTube's just taking money off you anyway. And they
Right.
don't have to pay you anything.
Well, I don't know about you, but they won't be making a lot of money off my videos because I don't get enough views for that.
Oh yeah, no, they won't make again, I'm not worried about making money. They won't be making money off me. But just the idea that it's what they're doing bothers me.
Right. Again, we can't change it unfortunately, so we just have to
No,
put up with it.
it's out of our control. Yeah.
Yeah. And it does bug me a little bit that half of the money every time someone subscribes, half of the money is technically going to Twitch. But at the same
Yes.
time, they have. I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff which is very good that Twitch does. And again, I don't know the
Yes.
full ins and outs, but just as somebody who is brand new, there's a lot of resources that they provide, and just the way the whole setup of trying to get things like the channel points and the sound effects and goodness what else on stream is it does make life a lot easier. And doing live streams
Hmm.
on Twitch is much easier to set up than on YouTube. And you have a lot more
Yeah.
like even that ability to actually tell um YouTube or Twitch rather what game you're playing instantly and if it what age rating it should be or if there's something particular you want to highlight and then you can tag it with certain things for people to find you. People just find they find other people more easily on Twitch. Um,
Hmm.
it was actually something that Snuff brought up, and Snuff was again maybe Snuff wasn't fully familiar with Twitch, or maybe Snuff might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here. But I remember the first time I raided somebody, and Snuff was just in chat going, "Oh my god, this is incredible!" And the
Hmm.
fact you can just pass the audiences around, and you can then discover other people is really nice. Um, again, I guess it depends on what it is you want from your entertainment. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I think YouTube serves a purpose for a certain thing, and then Twitch serves a purpose for something different. Um,
Yep.
and they're both
Yep.
fine in their own
I
way.
would agree with that. Yeah. They're both fine in their own way. They're both fine in their own ways. They're both awful in their own ways.
Well, that's true. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Both money grabbing in their own ways as well. But yeah,
Yep.
but I think a lot of it's come out from that is that all that interaction with people has really staved off the burnout for me. As you say,
That's great.
I'm probably am doing more than I used to do, but I don't feel as burnt out as I used to. Um,
That's awesome.
so hopefully that stays that way.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
sadly, some of the only ways that you can really learn what your limits should be is to go past them, which is kind of
right.
less than ideal. But I will say, just as a word of advice to anyone out there, give yourself at least one day off a week. I don't think that's just a me thing. I think anyone will benefit from giving yourself that ability to just have a mental break where you don't have to worry about work for one day a week. I think that's a general good piece of advice for avoiding burnout.
Yeah.
And as Scott Sword sort of implying, physical, human connection is a good thing. So,
Yeah. Especially nowadays we're becoming more and more isolated. But then
yes.
on the flip side, then we're able to meet people from other parts of the world a lot more easily. I mean, look at us. We're across the
We're doing
pond.
a podcast. That's what I was going to bring it up. Yeah.
And we're across the
It's
pond.
amazing.
This wouldn't have
Yeah.
been possible. Even probably 20 years ago, this would not have
Right.
been something remotely possible.
Do you have a satellite phone?
I dread to think the amount of charges we'd have wrapped up from that. We'd have to
Oh
commit and go,
man.
no, we can only do 10-minute podcasts. We can't afford it otherwise.
Super long distance, right?
Yeah.
Long distance pricing. All these things that have changed like in my lifetime that have made this possible. Like it's amazing how incredibly easy this is to do.
Was even through just knowing, for example, my wife and I met through the Erasmus program, which I talked about before, like the university exchange program. And then we had a long distance relationship, but we did it in the world of Skype. I mean, I know now Skype's going
Hmm.
to sound very old fashioned because everyone's on Zoom and Meet and WhatsApp calls and all that
I'm
sort
not
of thing.
convinced any of those are upgrades over Skype. I think Skype just became less relevant over time.
Yeah, poor Skype. The
Yeah,
sound of the Skype call will be ingrained in the memories of everybody of our generation.
absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
but we did it in that time period, and it was still difficult, but
Hmm.
it made it so much easier. But I had the privilege of meeting somebody recently who also has a partner from a different country, and they met on Erasmus, and then they had a distance relationship. But because of the
Hmm.
age, they were probably one of the first people to meet on Erasmus, because it'd been like one of the very first years of the Erasmus program, at least in Spain
Wow.
anyway. Think about the decade that it was, and then the fact they had to do a long distance relationship back then, and they were having to try and do long distance phone calls and racking up the phone
Hmm.
bills and sending letters and things. Obviously, email didn't exist and Skype didn't exist and all that didn't exist at that time, or in the sense that we
Wow.
use it now. Um, so it's just completely different type of
Yeah.
yeah. People made things
I
work
think
back
about
then. Yeah.
I think about translators back in like the 90s where the internet just was not what it has become.
Mm.
And these days I run across a term I don't know what it is, I can paste that into a search bar and find it.
Yeah.
I can if it's a reference to some obscure show that was really popular 15 years ago in Japan, right? I can find that. There's probably going to be some Japanese like archive page where I can watch it, right? And all the access that I have to these incredible resources that back in the day it would have been it goes over their head or they need to go to like a library and look things up in an encyclopedia or a dictionary or like the physical resources that used to be necessary that just simply are not necessary anymore. It's wild.
I feel pop culture references are the ones that age the worst.
Oh yeah.
They really date. Even in English, like I'm watching certain comedies that I like, and there'll be a certain pop culture reference. I don't know who they're talking about because this show was made when the decade that I was born, so I don't know who these
Hmm.
people are. They're not part of my
Yep.
conscious experience of growing up in the UK at that time or whatever. My college experience came, say 10 to 15 years later. Those are the people I can remember.
Hmm.
So trying to then think about translating it when you're in a different country and you don't know potentially a lot about the real intricacies of that culture or what's happening in that society at that
Yep.
time. Yeah, it's
Yep.
that
There's
was
an
tough
episode
going.
of an anime that I just watched for fun. I haven't worked on this professionally at all. But for fun, I used to watch. I still watch, I suppose, because the anime isn't over. My Hero Academia, and there are a bunch of references in that show. And one of the references is there's this episode where the characters are meeting the villains for the first time. And if you look at the title of the episode, the Japanese is um oh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a play on the phrase Michi to no Sogu. And if you translate that literally, you get Encounter with the Unknown. And I'm pretty sure that if you look at the English title for that anime episode, the official title is Encounter with the Unknown. And it's actually a reference to the Japanese title for the Steven Spielberg movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Ah,
where I was in a conversation with another friend of mine who's a translator who was shocked that when the phrase Michito no Sogu came up in some other thing that we were watching in Japanese, he was like, "Oh, that's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's the title of that movie in Japanese. Did you not know that?" I was like, "Oh, no." You can tell this person's a little bit older than me. I was like, "I had no idea. I would have just gone with Encounters with the Unknown." And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's that." And I remember thinking, boy, I bet if I came across that in my work and I hadn't had this conversation with my friend, it just would have gone over my head.
hmm
And I'm pretty sure the same thing happened with this person, because or with whoever was responsible for translating the title of that anime episode. I think they just saw Michito no Sogu and translated that like word for word, phrase for phrase, and it still makes for a decent sounding episode title. But I think if you know that this is the episode where the people are encountering these villains for the first time, and it's a play off of the title Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and you catch that reference, you can totally change that translation to Close Encounters of the Villainous Kind. And
okay,
you preserve the reference, you get a cool title,
right.
and it totally changes the way that you process that translation.
hmm
But even if they had done that, I imagine there's a bunch of people in the current generation who'd never even heard of the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the first place.
Probably not.
So would they even get that, right? Like even if they got the reference and translated it properly in the sense of like preserving the reference, it still may have just fallen on deaf ears in a lot of cases, right? It's wild to think how that works.
Yeah, perhaps, but then you might get some people who then, well, I don't know. Yeah, would you have people who would be interested to know why on earth the title was such, and they might research it, or it might be a throwback reference. Like a lot of these shows will then include references that only the generation older than them would understand.
Yeah.
Then maybe they can include it as a sort of as an Easter egg
Hmm.
for as the parents or the older generation who've seen that film. I don't know if I'm trying to remember if I've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think I have. I've got a very vague memory of like the kids in that show doing something with a trade set and trying to do like
Interesting.
trying to fix some sort of maths problem by
Yeah.
colliding trains or something. I've seen E.T. and that's a problem because they're fairly similar films. I keep mixing up things from E.T. from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, so I'm gonna have to watch both and
Yeah.
then work out which one's which. But I've seen E.T. at least twice, I think.
Yeah. I've seen E.T. a bunch. I've seen Close Encounters of the Third Time once, and I barely remember it. The one scene that sticks in my head is this guy decides to sculpt a mountain that like they're all being drawn to.
Well,
And later on in the movie, he knows something about the particular geographical features that gives him an advantage, and he's like, "Ah, you should try sculpting next time," because like all these other people were working like as artists and they were drawing. It was funny. That's like the one thing I remember about that movie. And the shiny UFOs, of course.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I remember rightly, maybe I've only seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind because maybe my dad recorded it thinking that it was E.T. That
Oh, maybe.
that might have been because it's both by Spielberg, right? Unless I'm
Yes.
okay, so yeah, it's both by the same director. So yeah, maybe that might have been it.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't have a memory of that film. Not
Yeah.
really.
And there is the flip side of it, right? It's where it's not necessarily just an Easter egg for the previous generation. There are some things that you can come across and it's like, oh, I don't think anyone who is younger than me will understand this. And you sort of feel like you have hidden forbidden knowledge. It makes you feel powerful.
Well, that's only if the younger generation even care about that information. I had a case recently, and I do this joke every time in my class where immediately as soon as we're talking about dependent prepositions,
Hmm.
the one with pressure, as in under pressure, will always come
Yeah.
up, and I always say to them, "Remember, it's like the song." And they all look at me as if I'm going mental and the tumbleweed is blowing through. And I just start shouting. They're going, "Come on, David Bowie, Freddie Mercury, Queen, anybody?" Nah, don't get. Nah, there might be one person who'll know it, but
Wow.
that's it. And I even like, okay, maybe don't know the music or you don't know it by name, but Bohemian Rhapsody, huge film. And I'm probably thinking it's probably
Hmm.
older than I think it is. But for me, that's a really recent film, and I keep asking them, Bohemian Rhapsody? Anybody seen it? Nope.
Yeah.
And it just makes me feel very, very sad and very old at the same time.
Yeah. My high school used to have this practice. It wasn't really for the students, but I would overhear the teachers talking about it, where every year around graduation time, the staff would circulate amongst themselves events which the graduating students had never lived through. And it was astonishing to like get a sense that the teachers would just be like, they've never had the experience of this. They've never had the experience of this. That
Oh,
can't be right. You know, because all this stuff feels so like recent, relevant, and new. I actually had a like sort of a twist on this, um, where I was confronted with someone who like didn't really have the same appreciation. They did know what I was talking about. So I was talking with a friend of mine fairly early on in my experience doing translation born. And I was explaining to them, oh, I have this YouTube series where I talk about the translation of Bloodborne and how it sort of influences your interpretation of the story. And also, I get to talk about just some cool things that I think are interesting about translation, explaining the core concept of the series. And this is someone who has played Bloodborne and liked it. That's how we got onto the topic. And they listened to me explain the idea and they were like, that's a good idea. Have you ever thought about doing that for something that's popular?
oh wow. Oh damn. Stabbed through the heart.
It took
Unbelievable.
me a minute to recover from that one. I was like, but it is popular. But I love that game. It's like things loom larger in our minds when we fall in love with them. And I've
Right.
absolutely fallen in love with Bloodborne. So to me, like I'm doing this thing where I'm talking about how like, oh, it's been 10 years of Bloodborne, let's celebrate. It's like sort of the impetus for the Old Hunt series that I'm doing. And to me, Bloodborne is still relevant. It's still new. It's still exciting to talk about. And like, literally everybody else, maybe not literally, because there are some people who follow my channel who I think they're probably in the same boat as me, but basically the rest of the world has completely moved on or
It's.
never known about Bloodborne to begin
I'll
with.
give you a hint, Rook. It's 10 years old.
Yeah, I know. That's the irony.
Yeah.
Because in my head, it's like, no, this is still new. People are, it's like, I haven't played any of the Soulsborne games, like, except Dark Souls 3, past Bloodborne. So I haven't. It's not only has the like rest of the gaming world moved on, the series itself has moved on, and I'm just like, I'm still playing Bloodborne.
It's like
uh,
that's like me back in the day when people were like, "Do you play Call of Duty?" It's like, "Yeah, I play Call of Duty 4," and by that point, it moved on to like I don't know Black Ops 3 at that point.
oh yeah, sure.
But so I have the same problem with Fear of Dracula when I'm so obsessed about it, and even like people, especially people in real life who maybe don't know the scale of things. And
Hmm.
I was saying, oh yeah, I've got like I show them if they come round to the flat. I'll show them like the little stuff that Nomad sent me, like these little almost like postcard esque scenes from the board game, like Mina punching the vampire and the hoax splash art and stuff.
Nice.
And I'll be going to, oh yeah, we've got this tournament, blah blah blah, and then they'll be thinking of the scale of maybe like Wingspan, where there are hundreds of people in it, or Board Game Arena, where there's like these leagues of like hundreds of people, and they're like, oh, so how
Hmm.
many people are in your tournament? 20.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's a lot for us.
Yep.
It's just yeah, difference between expectation and reality. But again, we're so sort of in it.
Hmm.
So yeah, our expectations of everything is so wildly different. And I'm just having to explain to them, yeah, there are 20 people. Yes, it's very niche.
It's practically a record.
So yeah, but it's fine. If we're passionate about it, then that's the main thing, and we enjoy what we're
Yep.
doing. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I think my thing in terms of time, I think probably, I guess for Americans, I mean we've probably talked about this before. Kids who don't know what happened, well, they do know, but they weren't alive for 2001,
Yep.
because that's a pivotal part in sort of modern, I was gonna say U.S. history, but especially world history as well, and everything that's come from that.
Hmm.
For me, it's the London 2012 Olympics.
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of British people will kind of maybe agree with me. I guess it depends also on your politics and things, but for me, that was peak UK. Everything's gone to shit since then.
Oh
um,
wow.
so yeah, that was the point where even though maybe economically we weren't doing so great, but everyone was really happy, and we had the Olympics, and we were all helping one another and whatnot, and we also did very well in those Olympics, relatively speaking. Um, and I've got a class this year who are a little bit younger than the students I normally teach. I normally teach a little bit older, but I'm having to do a bit of substituting. And I just said to them, "Oh, just out of pure, you know, just pure conversation, trying to get them to focus on something." I was saying, "Well, do you know that London hosted the Olympics?"
Hmm.
Nope. Tumbleweed blew through, and I was like, 2012. And they all said to me,
Wow.
"We weren't born then."
Wow.
And that depressed me a lot.
Yeah.
Because for me, again,
Oh
that,
man.
that happened yesterday. I know it was 13 years
Yeah.
ago, but that
Yeah.
still feels like it happened yesterday. Because it was
Hmm.
such a momentous time, and I remember coming home every day from work during that summer break, before I went off to uni, and I was, watching everything that was on the TV and watching the handball and watching the athletics. In sports I would never normally watch, but I was watching it all and really getting hyped with it.
Hmm.
And the opening ceremony, the closing ceremony, and everything. And yeah, the people alive who don't maybe even know that they hosted it, and that just
Yeah.
oh,
It's
that
wild.
makes me feel partly old, but also just very disappointed.
Hmm.
um, so I don't know if they think I'm old. I dread to think what they think of their parents.
Yeah.
They must think they're ancient.
They must.
And grandparents, oh my goodness, they're just. Were you alive when the pyramids were being constructed?
Yeah.
Oh dear. We've strayed quite a bit from Burnout. I don't know how we got here, as per usual.
Yeah. I don't know how we got here either. It's we start talking and we conversations happen, right? It's there's only so much we can control. I feel like we got a nice chunk on burnout in this like central part of the episode there.
Is there anything in particular that you're also trying to do before we wrap it up? Before we wrap up this episode, to make sure that we don't get burnt out.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you're doing, like small things that you're doing to try to alleviate burnout? Just something you do as maybe even throughout the day as like a little uh, strategy to take a break, or
I make sure that I give myself at least an hour on my meal breaks.
okay.
So it's very small, but the ability to just sit and eat. And if I'm like especially burned out, that's literally all I will do. And if I'm not especially burned out, I can put on like a YouTube video or something, listen to some music, um, find a way to focus on something that is not the experience that I've just immersed myself in for the past however many hours. And I find that that's helpful for me.
hmm I try to do something similar. My one again, I'm playing into stereotypes a little bit, but I like taking siestas. But
Hmm.
I'm not very productive in the afternoons anyway. I get that afternoon sort of energy slump after lunch energy
Hmm.
low. So, and if I know I've got important, especially in person work to do in the afternoon, then I have a little bit more of an attitude now where I'll just say, sod it. I know I've got work to do, but I'm going to go and take a half an hour nap because if that makes me put me in a better state of mind, in a better mood, and more productive for the rest of the afternoon, then it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
rather than just trying to power through. Because sometimes I've like, especially in the last few weeks, I've had to power through, and I'm rushing to have lunch and rushing to prepare stuff and doing this and doing that and running around all over town trying to do certain things. You just end up exhausted, and I'm just arriving, especially when I've got group class, I can't do it so much, but especially when I'm trying to then, when I've got one-to-one classes and stuff, and I'm just coming in, just
Mm-hmm.
going, I'm so sorry I'm late, or I'm so sorry that I'm tired, or whatever. It's
Yep.
just, yeah, you can't do everything. So yeah, I'm trying to just, I think also not punish myself too much if I can't do something. If I'm not in
Mm-hmm.
the mood to do something, then I won't do it, and try
Yep.
and sort of take easy victories a little bit, if
Mm-hmm.
possible. But
Yep. I think that's good advice. Another thing that I try to do is get in a little bit of exercise. Uh, that one I fluctuate on. I'm not so good about keeping myself to it. But I feel like, particularly in my line of work, the work that I do is so cerebral. The ability to just go for a walk, or I like to do jump rope, uh, do something physical that I don't really have to think about is helpful.
hmm, that's something I need to be better at. Actually, I need to get back into exercise. But again, I'm one of these type where I can't just do exercise. I need to play a game. I can play
Hmm.
tennis all day, but if I'm running deliberately, then I get very bored of it very quickly. Again, lack of discipline, and also
Yeah.
now I'm unfit, so it makes it even harder. But I just like to go for walks. Um, I
Hmm.
did actually find I need to go back to it. Actually, talking about bagpipes, I need to go back out with the pipes again because I found that was also
Mm.
really good. Even though I started getting frustrated at the pipes, so I could play them well. I did once I started getting into it. I actually found that to be a great sort of stress reliever. Um,
Hmm.
but again, that's a little bit more. You got to dedicate more time to because I have to get away from because I can't play in the flat because I think I'll be getting eviction
Right.
notices. So I have to go and find a place
Yeah.
where I'm not going to disturb anybody, and I won't be disturbed too much, and then
Hmm.
get back. So it's a longer sort of commitment, but it's something I want to try and do, especially now the better weather is coming. Take advantage.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think we've made a dent in it. But again, it would be interesting to see if anybody wants to comment below on any of their burnout avoiding tips and tricks. Um,
Yeah.
then
Yeah. I certainly haven't figured it all out, so
no, me
I
neither.
may end up learning things if people leave some comments. Could be helpful.
Absolutely.
I
So
feel like the biggest thing is setting those limits, but
yeah, but again, you have to
can
learn
be
that through
difficult to do.
experience,
Yeah.
which can be tough.
Hmm.
I think also in the transition when I don't know about you, but I always felt like as a student or at least as a high schooler, I worked way more.
Hmm.
But maybe because you're just in that routine and rhythm, and you're only doing studying. Whereas then, as soon as you
Right.
become an adult, you've got other responsibilities, which then eat
Yeah.
into your time. Not just eat into your time, but also eat into your capacity to work or be
Hmm.
productive. Because I said,
Yeah, for sure.
doing chores is not a free activity in the sense
Right.
of it does take energy to do, and same with like doing admin, which I personally hate. I detest doing
Hmm.
admin based tasks, especially if it involves
Yep.
calling somebody. That just drives me nuts, and I can't do anything for the rest of the day if I have to do that. But I'm getting better
Hmm.
at it. But yeah, I think that's the other
Yeah.
problem. So you got to view it through the lens of I'm now an adult, so I can't. I'm having to split my time in lots of different ways, and
Hmm.
not just studying and only studying.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, like I like to keep a journal. I find that it's helpful, but there are some days where it's just like not happening tonight.
Hmm.
I
Do you
like to sit back and like read over other entries and things, but sometimes it's just like, nope, I don't have the energy or the space for it. It's just gonna have to wait.
do you actually then are there days where you skip the journal entries?
I haven't done it so far. So far, I've been able to do it regularly enough that I'm then able to go back and fill in a day's entry after the fact.
Hmm.
However, like I think the healthy attitude to take is after a certain point, it's like, okay, there's no need to go back to those entries I just missed that day. Too bad, start over. Because that's one of the things that I think I learned in general. Like I think we were talking about a little bit before, which is don't force yourself to start from behind, right? Don't force yourself to go back to do something you missed
Right.
if you don't have to, because that's just gonna snowball even worse with everything else, going to keep you even further behind. Be willing to cut your losses and sort of let certain things go. And I haven't gotten to that point with my journal yet, but we'll see.
Well, it's like you with the whole subtitles and transcripts
Yes.
for your videos. You're going
Yeah.
backwards.
Yeah. And that's something I had to, quite frankly, that's something I had to cut. And I'm still looking to get back to it because I think it's a good thing to have the subtitles on the videos. But the way that I'm living right now, it's like, no, it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
And I don't feel that bad about not having them on the old hunt because it's so in the moment.
Yeah.
But Translation Born, I feel like that series should be captioned.
I've got the same thing. I know it's not as big of a task, but now I'm putting all the episodes up onto Spotify because I know you go around and you, especially the videos since you've joined, you've provided almost like show note type comments, and
Hmm.
I need to add them in
Oh,
because then
so you don't have to do that. I appreciate that you that you'd
I
like
want
to,
to.
but yeah.
Again, it's a time of going right. I have to go onto the video and dig out the comment and then make sure it's pasted in the right place. At the moment, I'm just telling myself just get the episodes up on Spotify.
Hmm.
If I got time to go back and add those notes and things, 'cause I've also done too. I've added comments. Then I will. If I can't,
Hmm.
then I'll start with this episode that we're recording right now. Um,
Which ironically, I doubt I'll have much to add to this one, but we'll see.
that'll make my job a little bit easier then.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's usually when we get into the like research, like historical sort of topics where
Yeah.
I need to go and like make sure that I'm not misleading people. It's just I feel compelled to be like, no, I don't want to give out wrong information. So I go in after the fact, and there was one episode where I made you edit me in
Yeah.
so that
Twice,
because
I
I was
think.
like this,
No, I
yeah,
did it
this change,
twice. Yeah.
yeah, I was like this change is important enough that I want people to know that what I'm about to say is wrong. Most of the time I'm okay with just leaving it in a comment, and if it happens, if I make a mistake live, people can understand, I hope. But that one where I was just dead wrong about the setup of the Japanese rail system, I was like, I need to put in a vocal note here.
And I ended up adding two of my own in.
Right.
Yeah. That's a that's an
My
interesting
perfectionism
episode.
enabling yours.
Yeah. I was like, oh well, Rook's done it. I'm gonna have to do it as well. But I won't script it.
Hmm.
Oh well. I guess so that we stick to our own advice and not burn ourselves out as we're reaching the 3 hour
Hmm.
mark. We could probably call it for this one.
I think so.
We'll have to see what the next one has in store. We have got an idea. I think we've floated it in a previous podcast, but again, it's going to be one that will need a little bit of thought and research. So I don't know.
Hmm.
We'll have to see how our work pans out if we're going to be able to tackle that in the next episode. If not, then I'm sure we'll find something else to talk about. I guess also that by the time we record that episode, will the tournament be wrapping up? Possibly. So
Probably.
we might have some Fear of Dracula stuff to talk about, and we'll see. I'll try and get around to watching more of the Bloodborne videos that you're putting out, and we can have a bit more discussion on them. I'll try and make some
Yeah, that would
notes
be
and
interesting.
things.
I'm very curious what your experience to that would be as someone who has no personal experience playing Bloodborne.
Um, just at the moment, I'm trying to take in everything, and like obviously you're talking about the lore and stuff, and I'm just watching you run around killing stuff.
Yeah.
So it might just be that. My only comment might just be I'm enjoying the playthrough.
Hmm. It might be.
I might
Yeah.
have anything profound to say, but I'll have to see. We'll see what the next episode has in store. Obviously, this will come out at the beginning of May, so then we'll see. Hopefully, we'll be able to be with you at the beginning of June. Um, we'll we'll see how the next few weeks pan out.
For sure.
But always a pleasure, Rook,
Likewise.
and
And thank you all for listening. I hope that we were able to keep you company for these few hours.
absolutely, and hopefully you've all enjoyed it, whether you're watching it on YouTube or it's on Spotify. Hopefully, it's all working out great, and feel free to leave any comments, and I'll try and make sure I keep an eye on all the potential comment sections, and there might be some people in the Discord might be saying something as well. So I'll try and accumulate anything in case we got some follow up for the next episode.
Great.
I don't think there'll be any problem of us recording the next episode before this one's been released. So we should be able to pick up some feedback if there is any.
Sounds good.
All right, and it's perfectly timed because we can see the sheep in Tiny Glade wandering around. So
Mhm.
I'll leave you with that view of Tiny Glade and the sheep. And yeah, feel free if you want to see Tiny Glade, check it out for yourself. It's on Steam, and yeah, I'll be trying to do some stuff. And there's loads of people who stream it on Twitch. So if it looks like something that'd be your thing, come and check it out. But yeah, thank you for watching,
All
everybody,
right.
and thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.